No, bitch.
I visit Israel and fight for it. There's another article on the Times of Israel today. I could read it on air. I was just reading before I got on. Charlie, what are you doing? Like, why are you? What am I doing? I'm sorry. Like, let's just take a step back here. Like, I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. Some of the message you saw, and you've seen how I've been treated by some, not all, by some.
It's very irritating. It's also unfair. They were coming after you at a turning point for well, look at Dave Smith there. Dave Smith isn't allowed to criticize Israel. Both sides, the Israelis are really on ours end.
No, you're not allowed to. It's worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the fifth time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put in question. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And it's I could go. I mean, you saw it. I mean, it was thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I would have been charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me
The bloodstain.
paranoid state. But then all of a sudden, like I host a person that I moderate the debate of, right? I give equal time to Josh.
There was napkins right here the whole time.
He's a Israel advocate, and my moral character is being put into question. I have less
Okay, kitty, ya sabes.
ability sometimes
Chiculerito.
to criticize the Israeli government
Sí.
backlash than
Ay,
actual
sí, qué
Israelis.
culero.
And that's really
Oh.
weird.
Culero.
I got texted about you, Megan. Saying, why is Megan like
Ah!
in a
Who's attacking me? He's trying to attack me.
like what is she's amazing. And I said, why are you texting about that?
Little bitch.
And so this is what they don't understand. You and I, Megan, the more you attack our moral character, actually the more we're going to double down in direction. Because screw you, I don't do it that way, okay?
Right.
Like, tell me I'm wrong. Cool. Tell me if I got
I'm watching Charlie Kirk.
You're not allowed to ask questions because these people must not have answers. But Charlie kept pushing. He had Ben Shapiro on about a month after this, and I'm sure Ben was not happy with this interview because Charlie was asking too many questions. And Ben could tell the trajectory Charlie was heading in because I guarantee he had been paying attention to everything Charlie was starting to say and question. So he's like freaking out. There's no way he's handling this well. You know, he had known Charlie since he was 18, and Charlie had always been a huge advocate of Israel. So to see his opinions start to change was probably causing Ben to crash out. And I'm sure he was offended by this interview because Charlie sounded very critical of Israel with his questions. So based on how Ben treats everyone else around him that starts to become more skeptical of Israel, I'm sure he's about
It's dangerous. Why?
after this interview.
So we've seen news this morning, which honestly I'm a little confused by, and
Fine.
navigate it and help us understand, which is that
I'm
Israel
fat. Don't judge me.
a lot of Hamas
Okay.
officials. What happened here, and if I were to introduce just a skeptical question, will this potentially endanger America's own interest in the Middle East? But looking at this from an American perspective, what else would you say things could have been handled differently? Maybe on the PR front, maybe also just on a conduct front? Where would you say, as an outsider, would things that could have been handled better, more efficiently, or with more precision?
Yo, yo.
Receive often, and we're starting
Gonna
to
eat.
to it tomorrow, is that Israel's committing genocide. How do you respond to that then?
There's literally no definition of genocide by which Israel is committing a genocide.
And one thing a friend sent me, interestingly, which is, okay, Charlie, we push back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border, so maybe we should also ask a question.
Yeah.
Is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question. You know, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know
Damn, Ben Shapiro's eyes.
critical questions.
Right there in Charlie Kirk, fucking. Damn, dude, that shit looks like a demon.
Have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be?
He looks like a demon.
I'm gonna say that you Jews own the media then. So I mean, come on. You can tell by all the wonderful
And then Charlie Kirk's fucking like sarcastic remarks. And his no wonder they killed him. Just kidding.
We're running out of time here, but just
We're running out of time here.
question
MAGA if you're anti-Israel? I don't like it for a couple reasons. How did you analyze that?
So the big thing is Charlie questioning October 7th and hosting that debate with Dave Smith at a TSA event, and probably was really frustrated with him and thought he was being anti-Semitic. I mean, Charlie admitted a bunch of Zionists thought that, but then, of course, after he got assassinated, then all of a sudden he was always the biggest advocate and supporter of Israel, according to them, and they denied that his opinion was changing at all, which is gross. You know, I'm sure there are a ton of Zionists that cut him off and attacked him because his opinion on Israel was changing.
They get him?
But then, when he died, they acted like Charlie was always their best friend and a huge supporter of Israel up until the very end. So these people are out of control, and everyone can see through Ben Shapiro's videos now. And that's why he's losing so much influence and panicking over it. Well, let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed the video, definitely check out the Patreon. I post longer videos like this over there. I talked about Joe Rogan exposing Messiah.
I don't feel like eating the
That was
rest.
a really interesting episode.
But I'm
I
hungry.
also covered Candace Owens versus Laura Loomer.
But I'm not gonna stay like to look at it for hours to see if there's
And there are over
no.
200 other exclusive videos that are each over 20 minutes. So if you enjoyed the video and like the channel, want extra content, it's definitely worth checking out. There'll be a link in the description.
Oportunidades como esta no siempre te caen del cielo.
Yeah, here.
Como un verdadero
You can't stop, right? You're gonna have to stop eventually.
24 horas.
You're gonna have to stop eventually.
There's a college in New York called Sarah Lawrence.
I don't know why I think that's. I thought that was so funny. I don't know why. When I finish, if that's okay. Right? When I finish, if that's okay. No, it's not okay. You're gonna have to continue doing hard labor until I fall asleep. I'm just kidding.
I feel sometimes like, how did I get in this position?
Just kidding.
This guy built a YouTube channel showing off his massive collection.
Off of the paper.
Zero people like you. Hey, send out 500 likes and you get...
Why was she just?
April 1988. Donald Trump sits on Oprah's couch.
You look like a
and says
mustache.
that ultimately, Ivana does exactly as he tells her to.
Oh.
She laughs. The audience laughs. That same spring, he handed her the Plaza Hotel and announced her salary in public. $1 a year, plus all the dresses she could buy. She had already signed 4 prenuptial agreements. Within 18 months, she'd be locked out of her own office in that hotel. Then she called a gossip columnist to the closet and buried him on 11 straight front pages. To understand how she did it, start in Prague, 1971. The salary line was a joke, and everybody in the room understood it as a joke. And that's exactly why it worked. He just paid something close to $400 million for the plaza. He put his wife in charge of it. A reporter asked what he was paying her, and he said, $1 a year, and all the dresses she could buy. It ran everywhere. Harry Hurt III, who reported on the Trumps through the divorce, described her as haunted by that line, striving in his telling.
$1 a year. Donald Trump said that he pays his wife $1 a year.
She wasn't decorative.
Damn,
Whatever
that's
else
fucked
you
up.
want to say, she worked.
I didn't know that.
Vice President, the pink marble in Trump Tower is hers. In the mid-'80s, she ran Trump Castle in Atlantic City as president and chief executive. Then the Plaza, where she reportedly spent tens of millions on the restoration, rewrote the staff dress code, changed the carpets, and this detail is from her own interviews at the time, insisted that every wedge of lemon be cut the same way. So here's the first thing worth sitting with. A woman running a landmark hotel for $1 and a wardrobe is not a punchline about a spoiled wife. It's a compensation structure. And a compensation structure is a form of control. She understood publicity as well as he did, which is why I'm going to spoil one of her stories immediately. In 1988, she told American journalists she'd been an alternate on the Czechoslovak ski team at the 1972 Winter Olympics, downhill and slalom. It has been repeated in obituaries for decades. It isn't true.
Oh my gosh, chat.
Czechoslovakia sent 4 women to those
Right.
games, and none of them were alpine skiers.
Let's see.
In 1989, Pomersny, Secretary General of the Czechoslovak Olympic Committee, said flatly that he'd searched and found no record of her. Snopes went back over it in 2021 and confirmed the same thing. That's not a small correction. It tells you she was building a version of herself long before she met anybody named Trump. She just had a much harder set of materials to work with. She was born Ivana Marie Zelnikova in February 1949.
Damn, Donald Trump loves his Soviet Union
After the country's
women.
first working-class president. It's Zlina now. Her father, Milos, was an electrical engineer.
No, it's
Her
too
mother
far.
worked as a telephone operator.
Should I lower it
Milos
down?
learned on skis at 4 and pushed
Get a
hard.
job.
And the payoff
I
was
should.
massive.
I
It was a junior
should.
national team,
But I
which
can't
meant
find
travel
one.
documents, which
Find me
was
one.
in order that most of her neighbors would
Don't make
never
me
cross.
ban you.
She took a master's in physical education at Charles University in Prague.
Don't make me ban
In
you, dude.
1970, she turned up in a children's television series.
I'm
She
barely
was
scraping
good-looking,
by.
athletic,
I'm barely scraping by, dude. Just like,
and stuck.
bro, you don't
And
have
in
to.
November 1971,
Shut up.
at 22,
Shut up, dude.
she married
I'm
an
gonna
Austrian
ban
ski
you.
instructor named Alfred Winkelmeyer. He was a friend.
Mm.
Every credible account, including her own and her lawyers,
I'm gonna ban you.
says the marriage was never
Bye.
consummated and was never
You're
meant to be.
banned.
She got the Austrian passport in March 1972 and noticed the specific shape of the
Whatever,
mirror.
I'm banning
She did
you.
not defect. Defectors couldn't go home. She wanted a document that let her leave and still return to see her parents. And that's precisely what she got. In August 1973, she took an absentee divorce in Los Angeles, where Winkelmeyer had gone to teach skiing. Keep that in mind. Before she was 25, Ivana had learned that a marriage certificate is a legal instrument, that it can be entered into for reasons that have nothing to do with feeling, and that the important clause is the one that lets you out. She had a real life in Prague too, and it ended badly. She was involved with Jerry Stadel, a lyricist and playwright who was killed in a car accident in 1973. After that, she went to Canada. In Montreal, she lived with George Sirivaka, a Czech who defected in 1971 and ran a ski
Trying to
boutique.
help you, right? I know, but you don't need to tell me the obvious. You're just stating the
She taught
obvious.
skiing, modeled for Eaton's and the designer Aki Sands. Did promotional work around the 1976 Olympics and took night classes at Field to sharpen her English. She told the Montreal Gazette in 1975 that modeling was a job, not a career.
Done.
That's the woman who came to New York in 1976 with a group of models and met a 30-year-old developer from Queens who was, at that point, mostly a woman about himself. Look at what each of them
Wait, which
actually
is?
saw.
Oh, it's this one.
He saw a European with a graduate degree, 4 or 5 languages, a face that photographed well, and an appetite for work that matched his own. One reviewer of the later documentary series put it about right. He chose a life partner deliberately, someone to work beside him and push back. She saw a man with access to Manhattan, a family with money, and after Czechoslovakia, after Montreal, after living as somebody's not quite wife, a permanent place to stand.
Okay.
Neither of them was being irrational. Both of them were making an acquisition. Which brings us to the first document. In March 1977,
I'm looking
after
at
roughly
this.
6 months together,
Like,
they sat down to negotiate a prenuptial agreement. The account we have of that room comes mainly from Hertz reporting and from contemporaneous press. So treat the details
You
as
think?
reconstruction rather than transcript. But the substance is not in dispute, because the agreement itself became the spine of everything that followed. He wanted a clause requiring her to hand back the jewelry he'd given her if the marriage ended. She walked out over it. She wanted a cash cushion in the event of divorce and asked for $150,000. She settled for $100,000. The lawyer drafting for the Trump side was Roy Cohn. Think about the sequence, because the sequence is the story. 6 years earlier, she had used a marriage to get out of one system. Now, she was signing her way into another one. And this time, the paperwork was written by Joseph McCarthy's former counsel. They married on April 9th, 1977, at Marble Collegiate Church on Fifth Avenue. The officiant was Norman Vincent Peale, the Trump family's minister and the author of The Power of Positive Thinking. A man whose entire theology was that if you present the successful version of yourself confidently enough, reality tends to fall in line.
wow.
You could not design a more appropriate ceremony for this particular marriage if you tried. She was 13 weeks from her first pregnancy and she had already signed away her claim on the fortune he hadn't built yet. The bride signed before she said the vows. That is the whole hierarchy of the next 13 years, visible on day one.
It's a normal line.
And nobody
I
in the
gotta
photographs
remember.
looks unhappy about it.
Oh,
Donald Jr.
I
arrived
guess.
at the end of 1977. Ivanka in 1981, Eric in 1984, and the agreement she'd signed did not stay
I don't
silent.
want to be facing the light.
As the fortune grew, she went back and renegotiated, in 1979, again in 1984, again in 1987. 4 versions in 10 years. In 1984, the cash figure rose to $2.5 million. By the end, the ceiling stood at $25 million, plus the Connecticut house. Every few years, the marriage got repriced. She always came out with more money and less ground, because each new signature confirmed the same principle. That whatever she built inside that company, her claim on it was whatever the last piece of paper said it was. Nobody outside the family saw any of this. What the public saw was the couple on magazine covers, the couple on Oprah, the couple on the BBC laughing with Dame Edna. New York's self-invented imperial couple, in Marie Brenner's phrase. Now go back to November 1979. Ivana flies to Prague with her 2-year-old son. Her parents meet her at the airport and drive her home to Zen. It's a family visit. The grandparents will teach that boy fluent Czech over the coming years, and he'll keep it. Someone was taking notes. A file opened on that trip records that Ivana was no longer modeling,
I'm
helping her husband
American.
in his
Right.
business activities, designing interiors for Trump-financed buildings, and that the little boy had 2 nannies and a recently fractured leg. The note, typed up by a lieutenant named Joseph Knopf, said the agency would give her operational attention during her stay. The source was her father. Milos Zelnicek talked to the STB for years. That's not a rumor, and it's not an American political attack. It's in the Czechoslovak secret police files. Declassified after
Secret
the regime
police
fell,
files.
and reported in 2016 and
What's in there?
2018 by The Guardian in partnership with the Czech Weekly Respect. He was classified as a conspiratorial informer. The relationship lasted until communism collapsed. Before you decide what to do with that, hold 2 things at once. The Czech historian Tomas Vilanek has pointed out that Zelnicek was an informant rather than an agent, and that men in his position were routinely squeezed, cooperate, or lose the travel privileges that let your daughter come home. He was a provincial engineer with a famous son-in-law and a state that noticed. There's no evidence Ivana knew what her father did with what she told him at the dinner table. But look at what she told him. In October 1988, she visited Zlin and mentioned, apparently in passing, that George H.W. Bush was going to win the American presidential election. Milos passed it on. Bush won. A file recorded that the outcome had confirmed the veracity of the information. That single accurate guess was worth more to Prague than a year of surveillance, because it proved she had a real line into the highest levels of American power. The directive that followed was to deepen the work. A report dated the 22nd of that same month is stranger still. It said Trump had been pressured to run for president in 1988 and declined because at 42 he thought himself too young, but that he intended to run in 1996 as an independent at 50. Even though it looks like a utopia, the report said, he is confident he will succeed. In the United States, essentially, nobody was taking that seriously yet. One more line from those files, and it's the one that should stop you. An informant wrote that any false step of hers would have incalculable consequences for the position of her husband, who intended to run for president. 2 intelligence services and 1 husband had all reached the same conclusion at roughly the same time.
I'm gonna turn off
Ivana was an asset, and assets are managed. Inside the company, management looked like promotion.
this one.
She was moved. Interior design,
Yeah,
then Atlantic City,
that one.
then the
Those
plaza,
right
each
there.
time upward on the org chart, and each time further from wherever he was.
Let me see.
The castle job put her in New Jersey most of the week. She flew back and forth. Colleagues and biographers have described a marriage that ran on schedules. And by the late 80s, the
Let
schedules
me
didn't
use the
work
camera
separately.
too.
Consider the shape of it. A couple who work together constantly were almost never in the same place. She was a division head. The chairman was her husband. And there was no appeals process. When he wanted her closer to Manhattan, she came back to Manhattan and got the plaza and the $1 a year line. When he stopped wanting her anywhere at all, he had a straightforward way to communicate that. By the summer of 1989, he was seeing Marla Maples, a 25-year-old actress and model from Georgia. This is the part everybody knows, and it's the part I'm least interested in, because a rich man having an affair in 1989 is not news. What matters is where he had it. Maples was around the same events, the same restaurants, the same social circuit. She spent time aboard the Trump Princess, the yacht. The affair was conducted inside the world. Ivana ran in front of people Ivana had to keep working with, which meant a growing number of New Yorkers knew something she was not being told. Maples has since said she never thought of herself as a mistress, that she prayed every step of the way. that she wishes it had happened after the papers were signed. Take that for what it's worth, a participant's recollection, given decades later. It doesn't change the geography. The geography is the humiliation. Then Aspen, at the end of December 1989. The family was there for Christmas. Trump had arranged for Maples to be in Aspen at the same time. The two women encountered each other in public, on the mountain, in front of other people. Accounts of exactly what was said vary depending on who was telling it and when. So I'm not going to reconstruct dialogue that nobody wrote down. Here's what isn't disputed.
Hey!
The wife and the mistress were
Oh,
put in the
I
same
thought it was
room
my
with the
cat.
husband
If I'm on
on
blowing her
family
nose.
holiday, with witnesses. That's the thing about the story
Oh
that
my
gets
God.
lost when it's retold as tabloid comedy. He didn't get caught. He arranged
I
it.
thought it was my cat.
Ivana
Like,
understood immediately what had
it was
changed.
my mom blowing her
Not
nose.
that he'd been unfaithful. She was 13 years into a marriage in that city, and she was not naive. What changed was that it was no longer private, which meant it was no longer manageable, which meant the terms of her employment had shifted without notice.
For me, it's
She didn't file first. She made a phone call. Liz Smith was the most read gossip columnist in the country, working for the New York Daily News. And she knew the Trumps socially. They had taken her on trips. Ivana asked her to come to the plaza. Smith went. On February 11, 1990, the Daily News told the world that Donald and Ivana Trump were finished. And the story was framed exactly the way Ivana needed it framed. The wife and business partner discarded for a younger woman. For 11 consecutive days, it ran on the front pages. Smith later said it was the biggest story she ever covered that amounted to a hill of beans, two rich people arguing about money, and that she came to regret becoming a character in it. Trump.
Nada me da más tranquilidad que saber que mis hijas salen de casa oliendo rico. Y con el nuevo Downy Intense Fresh, la ropa queda con ese olorcito fresco y limpio que las mamás amamos. Cuando regresan a casa se sienten como recién bañadas porque sus cápsulas de perfume se liberan durante todo el día para que huelan rico y fresco 24/7.
Si el estrés hace que la cabeza te retumbe, Sedalmer te levanta. Su fórmula con paracetamol y cafeína alivia a partir de 10 minutos los dolores de cabeza y la migraña. Manda a volar el dolor de cabeza con Sedalmer Max.
Perseguir historias es lo que me apasiona. Me acerca a nuevas personas y me deja conocer su forma de ver y de sentir el mundo. En cada historia hay una conexión, una emoción. Perseguir historias es mi lugar favorito. Me ha llevado más lejos de lo que alguna vez imaginé. Y es así como quiero seguir creciendo y aprendiendo. Totalmente nueva. Mazda CX-5 2026. Para las historias que estás por vivir. Mazda.
Trump reportedly threatened to buy the Daily News for the sole purpose of firing her. He couldn't. So he retaliated with the only instruments he had. By that February, according to the Chicago Tribune, he had locked her out of her office at the plaza. Sit with that image for a second. The hotel she had spent a year and a half restoring, the lemon wedges and the carpets and the staff dress code, the job she'd taken for $1 and a public joke, and the locks changed while the newspapers were still calling her the woman who ran the plaza. The counterattack ran through the New York Post, where Cindy Adams was a friend of Donald's. On February 13, the Post's front page mocked Ivana's financial demands. On February 16 came the headline that outlived everyone involved. A claim attributed to Maples through a supposed friend about Trump's performance in bed. Maples has denied ever saying it. A Post editor at the time reportedly approved the story on the theory that this was one Donald would never sue over. So the marriage ended the way it had been conducted, as a media campaign, with columnists as surrogates and headlines as artillery. The difference is that Ivana fired first, and Ivana was better at it. She had spent a decade watching him build a personality out of press coverage. She'd taken notes. And it did her almost no good at all, because the paperwork was still the paperwork. Her lawyers went after the prenuptial agreements, all four of them, arguing she was entitled to a share of what she'd helped build. Reports at the time put her claims in the range of 150 to 500 million. Her spokesman said she sought only a fair settlement of the fortune she and her husband had built for their family. Her timing was catastrophic. Trump in 1990 was at what he later called the lowest financial point of his life, so overextended that the banks were negotiating with him rather than foreclosing on him. There was no clean pile of money to divide, and the agreements she had signed in 1977, 1979, 1984, and 1987 said what they said. In October 1990, with the divorce still unresolved, Milos Zelnicek died suddenly of a heart attack in Czechoslovakia. He was 63. The funeral was held in Zlín the following month. Donald Trump went with her and stood at her side. I want to be careful here because this is the moment the story could turn sentimental and it shouldn't. There is no evidence this was a reconciliation. They were in open legal war and the tabloids were still running daily. He got on a plane to a country he had no reason to visit, for a man who had spent years reporting on him to the secret police, though there's no indication Trump knew that. And he stood beside his wife in front of her mother and her town, while the American press was calling her every name available. Two things were true simultaneously, and the surviving record doesn't let us collapse them into one. He humiliated her publicly and systematically for the better part of a year. He also showed up in Zlín in November. People who have never been in a long marriage find that contradictory. People who have, don't. The trip changed nothing legal. The divorce was granted on December 12, 1990, on the grounds of cruel and inhumane treatment by Donald. That phrase is not a tabloid flourish. It's the legal ground on which a New York judge dissolved the marriage, and it went in uncontested. The money took 3 more months. In March 1991, the New York Times reported the terms: $14 million, the 45-room house in Connecticut, an apartment at Trump Plaza, $650,000 a year for the children, and the use of Mar-a-Lago for 1 month a year. She had asked for a share of the empire and received a visitor's pass to it. But the number was never the real cost of that settlement. Buried in the agreement was a clause about what she was allowed to say and about who had to approve it before she said it. She signed a confidentiality agreement as a condition of the settlement. Under it, she was required to seek his permission before discussing their marriage publicly. She tried, later, to have that portion struck. He refused. In 1992, an appellate court ruled it enforceable. So the woman who had just won the biggest tabloid war in New York history walked out of the marriage, legally forbidden to describe it, without the approval of the man she'd won it against. She tested the fence almost immediately. She sat down with Barbara Walters for 2020. In May 1991, Trump cut off her alimony payments over that interview and announced he'd sue her for damages. That's the enforcement mechanism, and it's worth naming plainly. Her income was contingent on her silence, and the silence was defined by him. She went back to Oprah in 1992 anyway, and said she would not let men dominate her anymore. Then she did something smarter than defiance. She stopped fighting for the right to tell the true story and started building a business out of the public one. Look at what she sold for the next 20 years. Clothing, fashion jewelry, and beauty products on the Home Shopping Network and on QVC in London. A fragrance company on Park Avenue. Novels. For Love Alone in 1992, Free to Love in 1993, thinly veiled fiction about a European woman who marries an American tycoon, which is how you narrate a marriage you're contractually barred from narrating. A divorce manual in 1995 called The Best Is Yet to Come. An advice column in the supermarket tabloid Globe running from 1995 to 2010. 15 years of telling other women what to do about their husbands. And in 1996, a cameo in the First Wives Club, delivering the line she is still quoted saying, "Ladies, you have to be strong and independent, and remember, don't get mad, get everything." She had gotten $14 million out of a man worth over $1 billion on paper. She had not gotten everything. She had gotten a brand, which in that family was arguably the more valuable asset, and she had built it out of the exact humiliation he'd inflicted on her. The Czech girl who invented an Olympic career in 1988 was now selling the story of the wronged first wife, and this time the story was true and it belonged to her. She married twice more. The Italian businessman Riccardo Mazzucchelli in 1995, divorced by 1997, and when that ended, she sued him for $15 million for violating the confidentiality clause in their prenuptial agreement. Read that again. She had become the person enforcing the GAE. The fourth wedding, in April 2008, is the one that explains what the marriage had actually turned into. She married the Italian actor Rossano Rubicondi, 23 years younger, in front of 400 guests at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump hosted it. His sister, the federal judge, Marianne Trump-Berry, officiated. Ivanka was maid of honor. Her ex-husband threw her a $3 million wedding to another man at his own house. That is not friendship, and it isn't forgiveness. It's a family corporation holding an annual meeting. 3 children, 10 eventual grandchildren, a shared name that was now a licensed product. The romance had been dead for 18 years, and the enterprise was thriving. The politics arrived and the arrangement held. In 2015, the Daily Beast's Tim Mack revisited an account from Harry Hurt's 1993 book, Lost Tycoon, which drew on Ivana's divorce deposition. Here is the record as it exists, stated carefully, because it deserves care. In a deposition during the divorce, Ivana used the word rape to describe an incident in 1989. When Hurt's book was going to press, she provided a statement, obtained through Donald and his lawyers, confirming she had used that word, saying she felt violated because the tenderness he normally showed her was absent, but that she did not want it interpreted in a literal or criminal sense. In 2015, she went further, calling the story totally without merit, saying they were the best of friends, and adding that she thought he'd make an incredible president. Every one of those later statements was made by a woman under a court-enforced agreement requiring his permission to speak about their marriage. That doesn't tell you what happened in 1989. It tells you why the record can't settle it, and historians remain divided for exactly that reason. What is not divided is what Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen said to the reporter, that by definition you cannot rape your spouse, which was false in New York and had been since 1984, alongside a threat to take him for every penny he didn't have. Cohen apologized for the remark days later. When Trump won in 2016, he offered her the ambassadorship to the Czech Republic. She turned it down. The girl who needed a fake marriage to get an Austrian passport was offered her country back as a gift, with a title, and said no. Her memoir came the next year, Raising Trump, 2017. Notice what it's about, not the marriage, the children. She wrote the one book she was permitted to write, about the one asset the settlement couldn't restrict, and she used it to claim the thing that mattered most to her, that whatever else the family was, those 3 were hers. She died on July 14, 2022, at 73, from blunt impact injuries after a fall at her home on the Upper East Side. The medical examiner ruled it an accident. Her funeral was at the Church of St. Vincent Ferrer, a few blocks away. She left an estate of $34 million, split among Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, with bequests to a close friend and to Dorothy Curry, the family's former nanny, a woman who had raised her children alongside her. Remembered in the will, while the man she'd been married to for 13 years received nothing. Then they buried her beside the first fairway at Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, under a small stone not far from the clubhouse. The internet decided within a week that it was a tax scheme. New Jersey exempts cemetery companies from property, sales, income, business, and inheritance tax, and a Dartmouth professor called the arrangement a trifecta of tax avoidance. It made a satisfying story. It's also, as far as the actual record goes, wrong. Tax specialists reviewing the statute concluded the golf club does not qualify as a cemetery company and receives no such exemption. The truth is worse, and it's a matter of public record. In 2014, the Trump Family Trust applied to the New Jersey State Cemetery Board for authority to operate a private 10-plot cemetery on a small parcel of that golf course for Donald Trump and members of his family. The board granted Certificate of Authority number 434 on February 4th, 2016. The plot was approved 6 years before she died. It was never built for her. It was built for him, on his favorite property. And she is the first person in it, the sole occupant, so far, of a family plot filed for by a trust she was not part of, on land she did not own under a document she never signed. Now go back to that couch in 1988. He says she does exactly as he tells her. She laughs, because in that room, at that moment, it plays as a joke between 2 people who are winning. She spent the next 34 years disproving it in the only currency available to her. She broke the story of her own divorce before he could. She turned the wronged wife into a product line and sold it on 2 continents. She wrote novels around a gag order and enforced an identical gag order on her own 3rd husband. She refused an ambassadorship from a sitting president. She wrote a book about the children and left the nanny a $1 million apartment and left him nothing. And every one of those moves was made inside a structure someone else had drafted, a passport marriage in Prague, 4 prenuptial agreements between 1977 and 1987, a confidentiality clause a court upheld in 1992, and a cemetery certificate issued in 2016. She got out of Czechoslovakia with a marriage certificate. She got out of the Trump marriage with a settlement that told her what she could say. She never got out of the paperwork. The scandal was never the affair, or the headlines, or the deposition everyone still argues about. The scandal is that a woman that formidable spent her whole life signing her way toward freedom, and the last document with her name on it was filed by somebody else. February 1990. 2 New York tabloids ran the same divorce on their front pages for 11 straight days. America thought it was watching a marriage explode. It wasn't. That marriage had been a contract since March 1977, when Ivana sat down to negotiate a prenup drafted by Roy Cohn. In 1988, her husband called a press conference, named her president of the plaza, and joked he'd pay her $1 a year. She phoned friends in tears. 3 years later, she signed something worse and spent the next 30 years finding ways around it. It began at a restaurant table. She was 27, in New York for a few days with a group of models sent to promote the Montreal Olympics, and the restaurant was full. In the version she told the New York Post decades later, a tall blonde man offered to get them seated. He did. He paid. He drove them back to the hotel afterward. She noticed, she said, that the good news and the bad news were the same fact. The table came with him attached. That's a charming story, and it's the one she repeated for 40 years, which is worth noticing on its own. Ivana was good at anecdotes. She sanded them down until they fit in an interview. What the anecdote leaves out is that she had already spent 6 years engineering her way across borders using documents, and that she was very, very good at it. Go back to where she came from. She was born Ivana Marie Zelnikova in 1949 in a Czechoslovak factory town that the communists had just renamed Gottwaldov. It is Zelin again now. Her father was an electrical engineer, her mother a telephone operator. She started skiing at 4 and made the junior national team, which mattered less for the medals than for the passport stamps. Team travel was one of the few legal ways a young Czech could see the other side of the wall and come back. Her mother later said, plainly, that the girl did not want to stay. There is a story attached to that period that got repeated for decades, that Ivana had been an alternate on the Czechoslovak Olympic ski team. It circulated in profiles all through the 80s. It is not true. Czechoslovakia did not send a single female alpine skier to the 1972 Winter Games. And in 1989, the Secretary General of the Czechoslovak Olympic Committee, Petr Pomezny, said he had searched and found no record of her involvement at all. Snopes confirmed the Olympic roster point in 2021. Keep that in mind because the pattern it establishes matters more than the lie itself. Ivana understood early that the paperwork version of your life and the true version of your life are 2 different documents, and that the paperwork version is the one people act on. In 1971, she married a man named Alfred Winkelmeyer. He was an Austrian ski instructor and, by her own account and everyone else's, a friend. Nothing more. She later called it a Cold War marriage and said it was never consummated. What it produced was an Austrian passport, issued in March 1972, which let her leave Czechoslovakia without defecting, meaning she could still go home and see her parents. In 1973, she got an absentee divorce in Los Angeles, where Winkelmeyer had moved to teach skiing. Think about what she had just done at 22. She had used a wedding as an exit visa. She landed in Montreal, where she lived with George Siravatka, a Czech skier she had dated since 1967, who had defected in 1971 and opened a ski boutique. She worked as a ski instructor and modeled for a Canadian agency. And here is a detail that gets skipped. During those years, she told people she was married to Siravatka. She was not. They never wed. So by the time she walked into that Manhattan restaurant, she had held one marriage she did not want and claimed a second one that did not exist. Marriage, for Ivana, had never once been a romantic institution. It was infrastructure. There was real loss underneath the maneuvering. Before Canada, she had been involved with Jiří Stadl, a well-known Prague lyricist, who was killed in a car crash in 1973.
Las primeras impresiones no se olvidan. Y la de tu aliento tampoco. Oral-B Criss Cross te da una limpieza que se ve y se siente. Sus cerdas cruzadas limpian profundamente hasta en los lugares más difíciles, previniendo el mal aliento. ¿Ves? Acércate con confianza. Tu limpieza perfecta empieza con Oral-B.
PMI feels the market's pulse. Trade with confidence, right when it matters. Elevate. Start trading now. Years Years later, in the middle of the Trump divorce, she told Ladies' Home Journal that before all of this, she had known exactly one tragedy in her life. She meant statal. That is the only window we get, and it is a small one. She did not hand out many. The paperwork caught up with her, briefly, in 1989. FBI files released decades later show the Bureau reviewing her immigration record, while New Jersey gaming regulators were looking at the Trump casinos. An October 1989 document described her Immigration and Naturalization Service file as fraught with inconsistencies about dates of residence, schooling, and employment. Agents noted that she had told the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement she studied at Charles University until 1973 that there was no mention anywhere in the file of time spent in Austria and no other indication she had attended Charles University at all. The Bureau later confirmed she had in fact earned a master's in physical education there in 1972. So the degree was real. The timeline was not. That is the shape of almost everything about her early life. A true thing presented in a shape that served the moment. Now put her across the table from Donald Trump in 1976. He was 30, still living largely inside his father's orbit, and he had just started chasing the deal that would make him the ruined Commodore Hotel next to Grand Central, which became the Grand Hyatt. He was not yet famous. He was a Queens developer with an outer borough name trying to get taken seriously in Manhattan. What did each of them see? She saw a country. She saw a man with money and a construction empire under him, and a route into New York that didn't run through a ski boutique in Montreal. He saw something New York couldn't manufacture: a European woman with an accent, an athletic resume, real design instincts, and an appetite for work. She wasn't decoration. She could run things, and within a few years she would be running very large things. That combination, a wife who upgraded the image and also did the labor, was from his side an extremely good acquisition. 9 months after the restaurant, they were getting married. In March 1977, before the wedding, she sat down for the first time to negotiate a prenuptial agreement. The lawyer across from her was Roy Cohn. If you don't know the name, Cohn had been Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel, and by the 70s he was Trump's attorney, fixer, and most important mentor. His clients included Fat Tony Salerno and John Gotti. He also, on the side, did family law, and his written advice on prenups was about as romantic as you'd expect. Plan now for the day the relationship goes down the drain. According to reporting later published by the New York Times, the agreement stipulated that if the couple split, Ivana would return everything he had given her during the marriage. The cars, the furs, the rings, not a division of assets, a return of inventory. She was stunned. Trump's response, according to the same accounts, was to blame the lawyer. That's a small moment, and it does a lot of work. The terms were his, the villain was assigned to Cohn, and the deal stood. She signed, then she signed again, and again. Over the years, the couple negotiated 4 successive prenuptial agreements, each one revisiting the price of her exit. Here's the detail that will pay off in 13 years, so hold on to it. Ivana's lawyer during that first negotiation had professional and personal ties to Trump's own circle. In 1977, that looked like convenience. In 1990, her divorce attorneys would use it as a crowbar, arguing she had never been properly represented at all. They married in April 1977 at Marble Collegiate Church on 5th Avenue. Sources give the date as either the 7th or the 9th, and the family's own accounts had never fully agreed. The officiant was Norman Vincent Peale, author of The Power of Positive Thinking, and the Trump family's pastor, which is almost too neat. The man who taught America that you can think your way into a better reality presided over the union of 2 people who had each already rewritten their own biography once. Her father, Milo Zelnicek, flew in from Zlin for it. On that trip, his belongings were searched at the airport on the orders of an officer of the SDB, Czechoslovakia's state security service. Researchers at the Prague-based Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes, working from files in the Czech Security Service's archive, have described the search as a signal rather than an investigation. The message was that permission to visit his daughter in America was conditional. That same year, Zelnicek began cooperating. The STB opened a long-running operation on the couple. Its code name was her first name. So the wedding produced 2 records. One was the marriage license. The other was a 2-page report filed by a secret police collaborator in a country she'd married a stranger to escape. She had used one marriage to get out. She had just signed into another that would take 13 years and 4 contracts to get out of. And the man she married was about to discover that his new wife was better at business than almost anyone he employed, which turned out to be the most dangerous thing about her. The work started immediately, and it was not ceremonial. She took on the interiors of the Grand Hyatt, the hotel that turned a Queens developer into a Manhattan name. Then Trump Tower, where the pink marble atrium and the brass and the whole gilded vocabulary of 80s New York got built partly to her specifications. She was made vice president of interior design for the Trump Organization. Then, in the mid-80s, she was sent to Atlantic City to run Trump's castle as president. 4,000 employees, a casino floor, payroll, comps, marketing, the whole machine. People who knew the operation have said flatly that he would not have gotten as far as he did without her. And while that's the kind of thing friends say after someone dies, in her case, there's a paper trail of actual responsibility behind it. She was not a wife who attended luncheons. She was a wife who ran a casino, and then went home to 3 children. Donald Jr. arrived in 1977, Ivanka in 1981, Eric in 1984. And here the marriage produced one of its stranger arrangements, one that says a lot about who Ivana actually was. She spoke Czech to her children. She sent them back to Zlin in the summers to stay with her parents, in an apartment in a communist factory town, with no staff and no yacht. Don Jr. came out of those summers fluent. Ivanka picked up fragments. Eric, born last after her parents' circumstances changed, never got it at all. We know about those summers with unusual precision, and the reason is uncomfortable. We know because the STB wrote them down. Her father's cooperation, which had started with a searched suitcase in 1977, became routine. Files studied by the Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes and reported by Czech television, and separately by The Guardian and the Czech magazine Respect, show Milos Zelnicek classified as a conspiratorial informer, feeding the local office reports on his daughter's life in America and his son-in-law's business. His phone calls with her were tapped. His mail was read. The relationship lasted until the regime itself ended. The Czech historian Peter Blazek, who worked on the files, has been careful about what this means. Zelnicek passed along material the service could get elsewhere anyway. There's no sign he handed over anything compromising. He was a mechanic and an amateur sports coach who wanted to be allowed to see his grandchildren. And the price of the airport gate was a conversation with a man from the ministry every so often. That is not espionage. That is a father being taxed. It did produce one document worth stopping on. On the 22nd of October, 1988, an STB report recorded that Donald Trump had declined pressure to run for president that year, because at 42 he considered himself too young, but that he intended to run in 1996 as an independent, and was confident he would win. The report allows that this looks like fantasy. The source was, ultimately, Ivana, talking to her father about her husband's ambitions during a visit home. In the United States in 1988, the public had almost nothing on this. There was an Oprah appearance where he said he wouldn't rule it out and thought he'd win if he tried. That was it. The fuller version, the year, the strategy, the certainty, sat in a filing cabinet in Prague because his wife told her dad. That's the marriage at its peak, and I want you to see both halves of it at once. Publicly, the Trump princess docked on the East River for the 4th of July, 1988. Ivana sworn in as an American citizen that May. The two of them photographed on the courthouse steps. Palm Beach balls, Adolfo suits, a couple who seemed to be competing with royalty and enjoying it. Privately, a woman commuting to a casino, teaching her kids a language from behind the Iron Curtain, and unknowingly relaying her husband's political timeline to a security service through her own father. Then came 1988 and the Plaza Hotel, and the moment the whole thing turned. Trump bought the Plaza that year for around $400 million, which even sympathetic accounts described as far too much. He announced that Ivana would be its president. He did it at a press conference. According to Marie Brenner, who reported the definitive contemporary account for Vanity Fair in September 1990, he told the room that his wife was a brilliant manager and that he'd pay her $1 a year and all the dresses she could buy. Read the joke again. $1 a year in dresses, delivered to reporters about the woman who had just spent years running his Atlantic City property. Brenner reported that Ivana called friends afterward in tears, asking how he could humiliate her that way. Everyone treated it as a promotion. It was the opposite. Ivana had argued against Atlantic City from the start. on the unglamorous grounds that the place had no airport. She lost that argument and then went down there and made the property work anyway. By 1988, though, Atlantic City had a new feature, Marla Maples. Brenner's reporting describes the affair as underway well before Ivana knew of it, and some later accounts date it to 1985, which should be treated as an estimate rather than a fact, since the people best positioned to know all had reasons to shade the calendar. What isn't in dispute is the geography problem. His wife was running a casino in the same small city where his girlfriend was staying. Brenner reported the ultimatum he put to Ivana: come back to New York and be his wife and mother to his children, or take the hotel. The Plaza was the elegant version of a transfer order. A friend told Brenner he had become so fixed on Maples that he was neglecting the business, which, given what happened to that business in 1990, is not a small observation. So she took the Plaza in New York at a nominal salary, 120 miles from where her husband's actual life was happening. She had been promoted out of the room. She did not find out for another year and a half. Her own account, in her 2017 memoir, is that she knew the marriage was over after a day in December 1989, in Aspen, when a young blonde woman she didn't recognize came up to her and announced that she loved Ivana's husband. And
Te damos la bienvenida a Revolut, el banco de Halland, donde puede personalizar el diseño de su tarjeta para que combine con su estilo.
Ante el primer síntoma de náuseas, indigestión o diarrea, toma Pepto-Bismol, que cubre, protege y alivia 5 problemas digestivos desde la primera toma. Tómalo ante los primeros síntomas. Descárgala, regístrate y arranca con 1,000 pesos de regalo.
Cada ronda que ganes te da un punto. Y mientras más puntos acumules, más cerca vas a estar de llevarte este increíble auto. Tienes hasta el 11 de diciembre para participar.
PlayWith entra a ganar.
¿Sin dinero? No hay problema. Préstamo rápido y flexible con ese crédito. Fácil de usar, con aprobación rápida. Obtén dinero ya, págalo después. Activa ese crédito. Ingresa el monto del préstamo. Selecciona el método de retiro. Y recíbelo al instante. Consíguelo ahora.
and asked whether Ivana did. She wrote that she told the woman to get lost, that she loved her husband, and that it was unladylike, but she was in shock. That's the version America knows. It's worth noting she told it differently in 1991 to Barbara Walters, where she described approaching a friend of Maples's to ask whether the rumor was true, and not realizing Maples herself was standing right there. Same day, same ski slope, two arrangements of who spoke first. Biographers have also reported that Trump had arranged for Maples to be in Aspen while his family was there. Whatever the precise choreography, the outcome is fixed. The wife found out on a public mountain, in front of people, on a family holiday. She confronted him. According to the account she gave later, she gave him a choice, and he chose Maples. What happened over the next 8 weeks is one of the great demonstrations of a woman with no legal leverage using the only instrument available to her. In early February 1990, just before flying to Tokyo for the Tyson versus Douglas fight, Trump told her he was leaving. His own hired spokesman characterized it to reporters as things simply not working out. On February 11th, the Daily News ran Liz Smith's column reporting that the marriage was finished. He came back from Japan to a banner headline. Smith was not a neutral party and never pretended to be. She knew the couple socially. Ivana asked her to come to the plaza. The news coverage that followed was unmistakably on Ivana's side. The loyal wife, the working partner, the woman who helped build the empire and was now being discarded for a younger one. The paper ran Trump material on the front page for 11 consecutive days. Newsweek put them on the cover on the 26th under the headline, The War of the Trumps, and noted that the pro-Ivana framing had a purpose, which became obvious the moment Trump's side leaked the existence of the pre-nuptial agreement. She had also by then hired the divorce attorney, Michael Kennedy, and a professional public relations man named John Scanlon. That is not the behavior of a woman in shock. That is a campaign staff. Trump lost the press war badly enough that he told people he would buy the Daily News simply to fire Liz Smith. Instead, his side went to the Post. On February 16th, the Post ran the front page that outlived everyone involved. A photograph of a delighted Donald Trump and a headline quoting Marla Maples on his sexual performance. Maples has denied ever saying that. Jill Brooke, then a Post columnist, wrote in 2018 that the paper's editors ran it because they were certain of one thing. This was the story Donald would never sue over. The Post's managing editor was right. But the page didn't do what it was supposed to. It made the husband look like a man delighted to be discussed. And it made the wife look like the only adult in the marriage. Meanwhile, he was telling the Post he liked Ivana, but they'd grown apart, that her arrogance had worsened, and that he didn't want to create another Leona Helmsley, the New York hotel operator then, on her way to federal prison for tax evasion, universally caricatured as a monstrous woman. He compared his wife of 13 years, publicly, to the most hated woman in New York, and in the same breath called their prenuptial agreement airtight, fair, and modern. He was about to find out how airtight it actually was, and the flaw wasn't in the money. It was in a decision made in March 1977, before either of them knew what the marriage would be worth. The 1977 agreement had been negotiated by a woman with a lawyer who was close to her fiancé's world. That was the crack. Kennedy's team went at the prenups on the grounds that Ivana had never had a genuinely independent representation when the first one was signed, and that everything built on top of it inherited the defect. Trump had called the agreement airtight in the papers. It was not. Her lawyers also put on the record what the marriage had been like in its final stretch. In a filing reviewed years later by the Daily Beast, they wrote that over the 3 years preceding the divorce, he had increasingly verbally abused and demeaned her in order to obtain her submission to his wishes, and that he had humiliated and verbally assaulted her. That's not a memoir written for money in 2017. That's a contemporaneous court document, filed while both parties were fighting. Then, in the middle of it, her father died. Milos Zelnicek had a heart attack in October 1990. He was 63. The funeral was held in Zlin in November, and Donald Trump flew to Czechoslovakia and stood next to his soon-to-be ex-wife through it, in front of her mother, her country, and the cameras. I don't think that was cynical. I think that's what makes it hard. He showed up for the worst week of her life, while their attorneys were still billing hours against each other, and there is no evidence it softened a single term of the settlement. Both things are true. The marriage had reached a point where genuine decency could occur and change nothing about the arithmetic. Something else was ending that month. The man who had been feeding reports to the STB for 13 years took his file with him. And the regime that ran it had collapsed the year before. Whatever Zelnicek had done to keep his visa, it was over, and nobody in New York knew it had happened at all. The uncontested divorce was granted in December 1990 on grounds of cruel and inhuman treatment by Donald Trump. He did not contest that characterization. It's in the judgment. Then, on March 22nd, 1991, they signed the settlement. And the settlement is where the marriage stopped being a marriage and became what it had always been underneath. She got $10 million in cash, payable within 90 days. $350,000 a year in maintenance. $300,000 a year in child support. The 45-room house in Greenwich, an apartment in the Trump Organization's New York building, use of the Palm Beach estate. Press reports put the total value around $25 million, though contemporary figures vary. The Post reported the cash portion as $14 million, other accounts as $10 million. The discrepancy was never fully resolved in public and probably never will be, because divorce records in New York are not open to inspection. What she also signed were paragraphs 9 and 10. Those paragraphs barred her from publishing, or causing to be published, any diary, memoir, letter, story, photograph, interview, article, essay, account, or description or depiction of any kind whatsoever. And here's the phrase that matters, whether fictionalized or not, concerning her marriage to Donald, or any other aspect of his personal, business, or financial affairs. Whether fictionalized or not, somebody drafting that clause anticipated the novel before she wrote it. Breach it, and the payments stopped, and the benefits terminated, and he could seek an injunction to shut her up. She tried almost immediately to get free of it. In May 1991, Judge Phyllis Gangle Jacob set the 2 paragraphs aside on First Amendment grounds after her attorney argued they abridged her constitutional rights. Trump's lawyer immediately announced that this changed nothing about her contractual liability. He was right. In April 1992, the appellate division held the confidentiality provision enforceable, and said the lower court had excluded it from the judgment without notice or explanation. In June, the same court unanimously reaffirmed it and cleared him to sue her. In October, New York's highest court declined to hear her appeal. So the record is this: a judge granted her a divorce because of his cruelty, and then the courts of the same state confirmed that she had traded the right to describe it. She got the money. He got the silence. And America went on believing it had watched the whole thing happen on the front page, where the actual terms of that marriage were sitting in a sealed file with 2 paragraphs in the middle of it that nobody read. Now watch what she did with a gag order. In 1992, she published a novel called For Love Alone. It concerned a beautiful European woman who marries a rich, ruthless American and is betrayed by him. In 1993, she published a second one, Free to Love. Her lawyer, Floyd Abrams, one of the most prominent First Amendment litigators in the country, which tells you she was not improvising, said the obvious thing: it is a novel. It is not about Mr. Trump. Trump sued her for $25 million, arguing that the novel was the marriage with the names changed, and that publishing it voided the settlement. When the appellate court cleared him to proceed, he called it a great victory for everyone who believes in the sanctity of contracts, which is a remarkable sentence from a man who had just been divorced for cruelty, and was, at that moment, also suing to end her alimony on the theory that she was living with an Italian businessman. That's the woman she had become by 43. Barred from telling the story, she sold it as fiction, hired the country's best free speech lawyer, and made him litigate the difference. The suit dragged and went nowhere near a verdict. And then she did something more effective than any lawsuit. She became likable. The QVC lines, the jewelry, the clothes, the beauty products, sold on cable to women who had watched her get humiliated in the tabloids and decided she was one of them. The advice column in Globe, Ask Ivana, which she wrote from 1995 to 2010, 15 years of a woman who was legally forbidden to discuss her own divorce, dispensing advice to other people about theirs. A New York gossip columnist put the appeal plainly. Women related to her because she had suffered, and America loves someone who gets beaten down and comes back. She bought a yacht, she went back on the runway at 52, and she distilled the whole decade into a line she repeated for the rest of her life: don't get mad, get everything. Look at what that line actually is. It's the moral of a story she was under contract not to tell, compressed into 6 words that no court could touch. Then, in 1995, she married the Italian entrepreneur Riccardo Mazzucchelli, and when it fell apart 2 years later, she sued him for $15 million for violating the confidentiality clause in their prenuptial agreement. She had been gagged, so she started gagging people. The rest of it can be told quickly, because the pattern doesn't change, it just gets more comfortable. In April 2008, she married her 4th husband at Mar-a-Lago, and Donald Trump hosted the wedding. The ex-wife who had sued him and been sued by him got married in his ballroom. In 2015, as he ran for president, a reporter for the Daily Beast went back to Harry Hurt III's 1993 biography, Lost Tycoon, which quoted her sealed 1990 deposition, in which she had used the word rape to describe an incident in 1989.
Earnings season is near. Trade the volatility. Low spreads. No fees.
Aquí no hay letras chicas. Si ganas, estudia. Juega con promos y gana con un solo pase. Empieza con 4 apuestas gratis.
Head and Shoulders presenta el guardián de la casa. ¿Amas el verano? El lomo de la caspa también. Porque se alimenta de la velocidad causando caspa. Suma un día más de Head and Shoulders a tu verano. Para un cabello limpio y hasta 100% libre de caspa. Cuanto más lo uses, más te va a encantar. Head and Shoulders.
Todos los meses envío dinero de España a Colombia. Y con Global 66 lo hago en minutos, lo hago sin comisiones escondidas y con el tipo de cambio real. Así fácil como debería ser todo siempre.
Handle this carefully, because the record demands it. Trump has always denied it. When Hurt III's book was going to press, Trump and his lawyers produced a statement from Ivana that was printed on the first page of the book, in which she confirmed she had said it in the deposition, said she had felt violated, and said she did not want her words interpreted in a literal or criminal sense. In 2015, she went further and called the story totally without merit. Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, defending him, told a reporter that a man cannot rape his spouse, then apologized and called his own comment inarticulate. And every one of Ivana's later statements was made by a woman who, since March 1991, could not legally discuss her marriage without his permission, and would lose her settlement if she did. That doesn't tell you what happened in 1989. It tells you why nothing she said afterward can be read as if she were free. In October 2017, she published Raising Trump, a memoir about her children that was warm about the marriage and unforgiving about Marla Maples, whom she accused of participating in her humiliation. Notice what got published and what didn't. The book was about motherhood. Motherhood wasn't in paragraph 9. On Good Morning America, promoting it, she joked that she had the direct number to the White House but didn't use it because she didn't want to make Melania jealous. She was, after all, the First Lady. First Lady, okay. Melania's office responded the same day, through her spokeswoman Stephanie Grisham, that there was clearly no substance to the statement, that it was attention-seeking and self-serving noise, and that the actual First Lady planned to use her title to help children, not sell books. Ivana had made a joke on morning television and drawn return fire from the East Wing. At 68, with a gag order still on her, she could move a White House with one sentence. She died at her Manhattan townhouse on July 14, 2022, at 73, of injuries from a fall. She left an estate of about $34 million, most of it split among Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, with bequests to a close friend and to Dorothy Curry, the family's former nanny, the woman who had helped raise the children while their mother ran a casino. She was buried at Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, in a simple grave near the first tee, on grounds the club had registered as a cemetery. Go back to that press conference in 1988. He stands up in front of reporters, names his wife president of the plaza, and gets a laugh with a line about $1 a year and all the dresses she could buy. It plays as affection. It was a demotion delivered as a compliment, and she went home and cried on the phone about it, and then went and ran the hotel anyway, because that was the arrangement. He could take the plaza back. He took it back within 18 months, and had her locked out of her own office there in February 1990. The grave is not a title. There is no clause in it. The woman he paid $1 a year, the one he made sign 4 contracts, and then a 5th that forbade her from saying what any of it was like, is the only one of his wives who is never leaving his property.
Oportunidades como esta no siempre te caen del cielo. Aprovéchalas como un verdadero rey. Juega y gana las 24 horas en el casino en vivo de Play-Do. Regístrate y recibe $1,000 de regalo. El verdadero lujo está en Play-Do. Apuéstale, mi rey.
Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to continue with their cuts to the Department of Education.
The showdown over the power of the president.
The Constitution vests all of the executive power of the federal government in a single person, the president.
Do we have the rule of law, or do we have royal decrees? That's what's at stake here.
You're not going to scare us, and we're not going to stop.
Our constitutional structure is definitely stressed.
Now on Frontline, Trump's power and the rule of law.
For his inauguration parade, he is expected to fire up that tax crowd there.
President Trump will sign in the arena from cheering crowds a number of executive orders.
Norms and institutions are a thing of the past. The wrecking ball is back. And this time, he and his supporters mean business. Things are going to get wrecked because they need to be.
What did you say when I'm saying?
Sure. The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others.
For a lot of Americans, it just looks like change. Donald Trump is someone who campaigned on, say, who test American institutions. And it looks like Donald Trump is delivering on these promises to upend Washington, to drain the swamp, to do it completely differently. He was as if he was sending thunderbolts out to the country.
Here's the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
All I have to do is put my Sharpie on the page and I can make law a reality. And he did one after the next, after the next.
The next item, sir, is a freeze on all federal hiring.
There were so many things happening at once that it was very hard to focus on any single one thing.
Address the cost of living crisis that has cost Americans so dear. Requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work. Restoration of freedom of speech and preventing government censorship of free speech going forward. Ending the weaponization of government against the political adversaries of the previous administration as we've seen.
That was what Steve Bannon used to call the flood the zone approach to politics. Just drown them in it.
Could you imagine Biden doing this? I don't think so.
That's President Trump. I mean, he's all about action. You know, all gas, no brake. I want to hit it and just overwhelm the system with action, action, action. That's what we call it Days of Thunder.
President Trump ran on very specific campaign promises. He's going to reform our government to make our governments work for real Americans instead of the other way around. He's going to secure our border. He's going to get illegal immigrants, including dangerous terrorists, the hell out of our country. And President Trump is doing the unthinkable in Washington, D.C. He's actually delivering on his campaign promises to the American people, and he's doing it very fast.
What he's saying in that day is, I'm going to be a man of action. It's a phrase he likes, a man of action. And he's going to do it with the stroke of a pen. We saw a president using his power from the very first moment in very expansive ways to put his fingerprints on all sorts of areas of the government and society. He signed more executive orders on day one than any of his predecessors ever did in their early days. And they stretched the power and the authority of the presidency beyond what any previous president had done.
President Trump leaving the White House for the last time as president.
Just how quickly and how fast things fell apart from this president.
He is leaving the White House with much fewer people standing by his side in the wake of the January 6th riots.
After January 6th and what happened on the Capitol that day, it was universally terrible. There wasn't even the most ardent Trump fan defending it. He had been entirely ruled out.
He leaves office in disgrace, the only ever president to be impeached twice.
Trump leaves Washington seemingly for 4 years of exile, maybe a lifetime of exile. Just utter bottom.
After President Trump left in January of 2021, your audience should understand that President Trump and the core team around him, we were deplatformed by big tech. We were debanked.
Steve Bannon was Trump's 2016 campaign CEO, his White House chief strategist. He was charged with fraud and went to prison rather than testify about Trump's role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
In those years of 21 and 22, when the entire world was against President Trump and his team, it looked like the odds were so incredibly long.
It was a very lonely time around Mar-a-Lago. President Trump was essentially a dead political body left on the side of the road. In isolation at his Florida estate, more trouble for the former president.
The FBI raided the former president's Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, unannounced, breaking into the home. Former U.S. President Donald Trump once again found himself the target of an investigation.
A cascade of other legal problems. Multiple civil trials.
Trump was found liable for sexually abusing and defaming E. Jean Carroll.
Business fraud.
Trump guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in the Stormy Daniels hush money case.
A federal grand jury here has indicted former President Donald Trump on 4 counts.
Indictment after indictment.
Charged with leading a criminal organization that worked to overturn the results.
The most serious charges that he'd worked to overturn the 2020 election, culminating with a mob of his supporters attacking the Capitol on January 6th while Congress was trying to certify the results.
An indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day.
Special Counsel Jack Smith had prosecuted Democrats and Republicans, but Trump supporters saw this case as politically motivated.
What they were doing was so wrong and so destructive to the presidency that you can have a president throw his predecessor in prison for non-crimes. And that's how we destroy our country. That's how we become a third world Marxist hellhole.
Mike Davis is one of Trump's trusted advisors, known in Trump's circle as the Viceroy, a Washington insider, a former chief counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee.
I was the only person, it seems, who would go on Fox News every day and defend President Trump. We've seen that they have weaponized, they have politicized law enforcement repeatedly to get Trump. I've done over 4,500 media hits supporting and defending President Trump. They have completely politicized the Justice Department. This Justice Department is rotten to the core.
A lot of what they're trying to do is recast the narrative of what happened to him during his impeachments, to recast the narrative of what happened on January 6th, to suggest it was a day of peaceful protest and not a violent attack on democracy. I think the public record and the investigations would show otherwise.
This is lawless, this is Democrat lawfare, this is election interference.
He has presidential immunity for his acts as the President of the United States.
Trump has come right up to the edge of saying, you don't get to tell me what the law says, I get to say what the law says. He believes, as he once said, that Article 2 of the Constitution means that he can do whatever he wants. He believes that if the president does it, it can't be illegal.
It was a familiar argument that a president was above the law. It went back more than 50 years to another president dogged by legal problems.
So what in a sense you're saying is that there are certain situations where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation or something and do something illegal.
But when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
If you think back to Richard Nixon's period, people called Richard Nixon an imperial president. He violated the laws and his administration was corrupt.
Nixon was accused of weaponizing the FBI and IRS against his political enemies.
The country tonight is in the midst of what may be the most serious constitutional crisis in its history.
Of covering up the break-in at the Democratic Party's offices at the Watergate complex.
What did the president know and when did he know it about the cover-up?
On refusing to comply with court orders to turn over Oval Office recordings.
President Nixon announced that he will neither appeal nor comply with a federal court order to turn over the Watergate tape. The news has caused a storm in Washington, and some of Mr. Nixon's most loyal supporters are calling for his resignation.
When the Supreme Court weighed in, Nixon relented, turning over the tapes and resigning the presidency in disgrace.
The president now at the door. A final wave.
after Watergate, there was an effort to reform the presidency and to put some constraints on it. A lot of ethics laws were passed, independent agencies were safeguarded. The whole effort was to fight corruption, to fight tyranny, to make sure that the president didn't become a tyrant.
Congress tried to take some power back. One way to think of it is, Gulliver is the president. And then after Watergate, what Congress did is they tried to tie him down, just like the Lilliputians tried to tie down Gulliver. Inspector generals, special counsels, these efforts to reduce the president's ability to control the cabinet agencies. That was an effort to fragment the executive branch. I think that was the mistake, to try to solve the Nixon problem by making the executive branch less effective.
Law professor John Yoo has long been an advocate for strong presidential power and a controversial doctrine called the unitary executive theory.
It is the idea that the Constitution vests all of the executive power of the federal government in a single person, the president.
It was a fringe theory that had been rejected by the Supreme Court. And in those years after Nixon, president after president would find their power constrained.
The power of the presidency was probably at its weakest in the post-Watergate years. I don't think it really picked up steam until, the post-9/11 era. 9/11 obviously was a significant event that required strong executive action.
The Twin Towers, the New York landmarks, have collapsed and are gone.
9/11. Thousands of Americans dead. A nation in crisis.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
A presidential administration looking to respond forcefully and exercise its power without constraints.
We also have to work with sort of the dark side, if you will. We're going to spend time in the shadows in the intelligence world. A lot of what needs to be done here will have to be done quietly, without any discussion, using sources and methods that are available to our intelligence agencies if we're going to be successful.
Cuando viajo con mi tarjeta ARC, no pago nada por el cambio. Descárgate el app de ARC. Y ya.
Hijo, llegué. ¿Qué pasó aquí? ¿Alguien rayó toda la pared? ¿Para que alguien se metió? No, ya sé quién fue. ¡Abre la puerta! No, me vas a dar. Ay, tendré que pintar todo esto. Y después de las compras, no me queda efectivo. Lo bueno, que puedo solicitar un préstamo personal con Mercado Pago. La mejor forma de tener dinero al instante. Gracias. Es 100% online y muy fácil. Solo tienes que entrar a la app de Mercado Pago, vas a la sección de créditos, solicitas tu préstamo y listo. Es más fácil que pintar esta pared.
Tengo una idea con gran potencial, pero yo sé que en el pasado mi historial financiero tuvo algunos tropiezos, pero créeme que aprendí. Es más, de hecho, analicé los fallos, estoy haciendo nuevas estrategias.
¿Cuánto dinero necesita?
18,000 pesos. De hecho, tengo un nuevo esquema financiero y créeme que esta vez va a funcionar. La inversión, créeme que va a funcionar. ¿En serio?
En PlaPla reconocemos el valor de cometer errores y devolverlo entero. En PlaPla no revisamos buro de crédito. No te complicamos la vida. Sabemos tu potencial y apoyamos tus proyectos. Es por eso que te ofrecemos plazos flexibles para que puedas pagar con tranquilidad. En PlaPla confiamos en ti.
Con PlaPla, apresta tus deudas.
Alexander Hamilton had said, the definition of good government is an energetic executive. You want someone who can act with speed, decisiveness, energy. You can see the presidency is trying to reassert itself to break free from these bonds that have been with us since Watergate.
John Yoo was at the Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel at the time.
The Bush administration relied on you more than any other lawyer in government to justify what they were doing.
We are protected from attack only by vigorous action abroad and increased vigilance at home.
You is on the extreme of legal debate over presidential power. That the law allowed the president to do extraordinary things after 9/11, including secret rendition to black sites, including torture, including spying on Americans with the NSA. Those things were nearly all repudiated, either by his successors in the Office of Legal Counsel or by courts who said that's not legal.
But in the years that followed, the Supreme Court was ready to enhance executive power.
Justice by justice, the conservatives were taking over the Supreme Court, and the theory of the unitary executive was becoming more widespread. And finally, this came to a head really in the final session of the 2024 Supreme Court.
It was that Trump case about his role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. It had gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Trump's lawyers made the Nixon argument. If the president does it, it's not illegal. And in large part, the court agreed.
In Trump versus United States, the Supreme Court, with Chief Justice Roberts writing, says the president is the chief of the executive branch, and the president is also in charge of executing the laws, and for this reason, must have immunity from presidents later on prosecuting him or her for those decisions.
The president may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers.
One of the reasons that Chief Justice gives is so that the president can fully run the executive branch without having to worry about his criminal liability or civil liability after.
The immunity decision was arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, legal victory that Donald Trump has had in his entire time in public life. It essentially spelled the meaningful end of the federal prosecutions of Donald Trump. That immunity decision, you could say that was like a precursor event to Trump 2.0 in almost every respect.
It was hugely important. It was the difference between President Trump going to prison versus going back to the White House. It was hugely consequential. It was one of the most important Supreme Court decisions in our history.
Trump won the presidency and a get-out-of-jail-free card. He has now been gifted legal immunity.
After winning an election, the federal cases all go away.
In his hush money case, unconditional discharge covering all 34 counts. No prison time, no fine.
Psychologically, it was a big stab of approval in the sense that the president is kind of above the law. I mean, literally above the law. That's what the immunity decision found. You can't find he's immune from a normal legal challenge. You got a pretty powerful feeling that you're kind of unconstrained.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that
Now, that sense of power would fuel his presidency.
It signals a very different kind of president, and a president who doesn't want to be bound by either the Constitution or statutory law. He believes he has literally unrestricted power.
so help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
The strategy is to flood the zone, to overwhelm the opposition, and stun people who are used to the legal constitutional order and the rule of law.
Donald Trump immediately getting to work with a remarkable show of the use of executive power.
We're going to see a president pardoning people who participated in this insurrection that he supported.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon. Full pardon. Full pardon.
He issues pardons and commutations to everybody who had been convicted of crimes in connection with the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
We hope they come out tonight, frankly.
He said it was a grave national injustice in his view that they had been convicted and prosecuted, and he called them hostages.
Peter Keisler, a prominent voice in the conservative legal world, was acting Attorney General for George W. Bush. He has become a critic of President Trump.
There's really no way to understand that decision except as an effort to protect people who had committed serious crimes simply because they committed those crimes in the course of supporting president's effort to stay in power.
With the stroke of a pen, the legal consequences virtually undone.
The largest criminal prosecution in U.S. history is abruptly over.
The persecutions of these January 6 defendants was so politicized, made it illegitimate. They went through years of suffering. They had their lives destroyed, bankrupted, lost family members. Some people killed themselves. So I have no problem with President Trump pardoning almost all of those January 6 defendants because they've suffered enough.
People who attacked Congress, people who used violence to spread their political message, people who had no regard for our institutions and our democracy. That's who he was issuing pardons for.
This was a day of violence. This was a day in which 140 police officers were injured, and we cannot rewrite the history of that day.
Property was destroyed. People were injured. Police officers trying to defend the democratic process died.
We stood up against a stolen election. We will be vindicated in the pages of history as patriots and freedom fighters.
He's put my family back together again. Without him, I wouldn't be out right now.
We don't condone violence, but we're also not the insurrectionists here.
I feel vindicated and validated. Yes, absolutely.
It really sends the signal that people can engage in violence on his behalf, and he's got that pardon power there for them. He wants people who are on his side to think, you know what, if I go a little bit too far, you know, they got a president there who's kind of watching out for you. It really puts us on a road that goes pretty far from the neutral rule of law and pretty far, unfortunately, towards a kind of personalized use of government to go after your enemies and to forgive those on your side who break the law.
Trump and his advisors were pushing to go further. Exact retribution for what they called lawfare.
I think retribution is a very important component of justice. It serves as a powerful deterrent to people who may commit crimes in the future, that there are going to be consequences. The president and his Justice Department team should hold accountable those who wage this unprecedented Republican lawfare against President Trump.
The first target, the Department of Justice itself.
They fired more than 24 career prosecutors, people who had worked either on the investigations and cases against Donald Trump himself or against the people who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
The message that I took out of it was if you persecute Americans as a Justice Department prosecutor or agent, you're going to lose your job, and you should. When you try to throw President Trump in prison for the rest of his life, when you try to bankrupt him, when you throw his supporters in prison after January 6th, when you do these things, there are consequences.
They also forced out about half a dozen or so of the senior career leaders at the FBI. They were fired as a group because they were not deemed to be sufficiently politically reliable. The message that sends is your job may depend on you being perceived as supporting the president's personal and political interests. And that sets the stage for turning law enforcement into another instrumentality of politics, where if you're the subject or a target of an investigation, how you're treated may depend on what your politics are. And that's the opposite of what the system should be doing.
It was time for Trump to deploy his own team to the Justice Department. One he could depend on.
At this stage of his presidency and what he wants to accomplish, he really only values loyalty and virtually nothing else.
Criminal defense attorney Ty Cobb was part of Trump's legal team during the first term. Now he's a critic.
He's not looking for them to tell him what to do. He's looking for them to do what he tells them to do. He learned a lot the first time around, I think, in terms of how far he could go.
Trump's first attorney general was Jeff Sessions.
Sessions was a constant object of his ire, in part because of the recusal without consultation with the White House.
I have now decided to recuse myself from any existing or future investigations of any matter relating in any way to the campaigns for President of the United States.
Trump saw Sessions' decision as disloyal, not protecting him from a DOJ investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election.
The Justice Department naming the former FBI Director Robert Mueller special counsel to take over the investigation.
That broke the president the wrong way, and he never got over it.
Time and again, during Trump's first term, it was the lawyers who got in his way.
There were people in the first Trump administration, the so-called grown-ups in the room, more traditional conservatives, Federalist Society lawyers who were very conservative ideologically, but were also very serious lawyers as well, who were occasionally willing to say no to ideas that they thought were outside the bounds of legitimate legal interpretation or just simply bad ideas, to raise objections, to slow things down. One of the lessons learned for the people who stuck with Trump after the events of January 6th was that one of their mistakes was having too many people like that around the president. And there was a very deliberate effort to vet people to ensure that they would be more in the MAGA mold, more permissive lawyers, people who were not going to be obstacles slowing down ideas coming out of the White House, but accelerators.
His new attorney general this time would be Pam Bondi.
I think she's going to be as impartial as you can possibly be. I know I'm supposed to say she's going to be totally impartial with respect to Democrats, and I think she will be as impartial as a person can be. I'm not sure if there's a possibility of totally, but she's going to be as total as you can get.
They were friends. They've known each other a long time. Part of this with Trump, yes, it is loyalty, and part of it is personal. She has served as his personal lawyer. I think he just really likes her.
The top deputies, Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, had both served as Trump's personal criminal defense attorneys.
The truism that he's treating the Justice Department as a personal law firm is almost literally true in the second term here, where he has filled its upper ranks with people who previously had been his personal lawyers. Defense lawyers for him have abruptly gone from trying to counter federal prosecutors and FBI agents to being the bosses of those people and being the instruments of his revenge against that institution.
It was breaking a barrier that had been erected after Watergate.
The Justice Department was not always as independent as it has been in my adult lifetime. John F. Kennedy did name his brother as Attorney General, but post-Nixon, because of who Nixon was and what he did and how the Justice Department abetted what he did, it has been separate.
Since Watergate, the norm, and it's been a healthy norm, has been really to keep hands off the Justice Department, hands off the FBI. I was in the White House many years ago. I actually went to the Justice Department very rarely when I was Vice President's Chief of Staff. And partly that was because we were really not just encouraged, but required not to deal directly with the Justice Department. It was just considered a terrible abuse of power to try to use the Justice Department for your own personal purposes or political purposes.
But Trump wasn't going to follow those rules.
He's the chief magistrate and the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, and the Attorney General reports directly to him. The FBI director reports to him. That's one of the keys to the unitary theory of the executive, that in the office of the president is executive power, which has really been lost since Watergate.
Trump decided to make a statement. He would go to the Department of Justice. Make it clear he was in charge.
By going to speak at the Justice Department, he is reasserting the president actually is, under the Constitution, ultimately responsible for the execution of federal law, for federal law enforcement, all of it. The Justice Department is not independent of the president.
Others who had worked in the Justice Department saw it differently.
Presidents only infrequently go to the Department of Justice at all. And for good reason.
J. Michael Luttig was a lawyer in the Reagan White House, a veteran of the DOJ under George H.W. Bush, and a prominent conservative appeals court judge. After January 6th, he became a vocal Trump critic.
There's every reason in the world, under our constitutional order, for the President of the United States to keep his distance. The president's political rally at the Department of Justice was reprehensible, and of course, it was unprecedented in all of American history.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Attorney General Pamela Bondi.
Hi, please be seated. Welcome to the Department of Justice.
It is an institution whose goals have uniformly been revered as a place where you try to at least achieve your vision of equal justice, unbiased justice, and depoliticized justice. Bondi didn't even try to talk about those things.
And we all work for the greatest president in the history of our country. We are so proud to work at the directive of Donald Trump. It is,
She made a point that they were all there for him, and to vote him. That's just not the way it's supposed to work. They're supposed to preserve and protect the Constitution, and they're not there to preserve and protect the presidency.
During the previous couple of years, while Trump was being prosecuted and convicted for crimes, he must have been seething and just waiting until he could take his revenge, because that's basically what he announced he was going to do when he walked into that Justice Department that day.
So now, as the chief law enforcement officer in our country, I will insist upon and demand full and complete accountability for the wrongs and abuses that have occurred.
There's a new sheriff in town. The American people elected President Trump back into the White House, and that Justice Department works for President Trump.
Unfortunately, in recent years, a corrupt group of hacks and radicals weaponized the vast powers of our intelligence and law enforcement agencies.
And there's going to be much needed accountability in this second term.
It's a campaign, and it's by the same scum that you have been dealing with for years, like guys like Andrew Weissman.
The message, to me at least, was this is going to be the Department of Justice that is basically the right hand of the White House.
Andrew Weissman was a federal prosecutor who worked for Robert Mueller investigating Trump and Russian interference in the 2016 election. In the years since, he's become a legal analyst and outspoken Trump critic.
If you are thinking about the attack on the rule of law, having a Justice Department that is not making decisions based on the political party or whether you're an opponent or a supporter of the president is absolutely central.
There's a guy named Norm Eisen. I don't even know what he looks like. His name is Norm Eisen of Crew. He's been after me for 9 years.
He's singling me out as an example. Hey, all you other lawyers, I'm gonna make a target of you as well.
Attorney Norm Eisen was a White House counsel under President Obama and helped Democrats build an impeachment case against Trump in 2019. And he filed numerous lawsuits against the Trump administration.
His sole life is to get Donald Trump, and he's been vicious and violent.
When I see Donald Trump lashing out against the legal profession, I see Lucer acting out of rage at the institution rule of law that he thinks he's right, is holding him back.
They're not legitimate people there. They're horrible people. They're scum.
It is the unambiguous declaration of an enemies list. People to become the targets of retribution from the federal government under his command.
I want these Democrat prosecutors and agents and judges and other operatives to understand there are still going to be severe legal, political, and financial consequences. The only way this will stop is if we give them very severe consequences.
Trump expected results and delivered a message directly to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche.
And the reason I'm saying this, Todd, is I'm only going to get one chance to say this. But these are bad people. I don't know.
When he said Todd, referring to Todd Blanche, who's now the #2 person at the Justice Department. Todd, this is the only chance I'll get. He means Todd Blanche used the Justice Department and the weight of the power of the American government against Norm Eisen.
The return of law and order.
He puts his arm around the Justice Department and essentially recruits them into his mission to take control.
Will revive these stories.
And in the kind of Orwellian guise of ending weaponization of the Justice Department, actually weaponizing it.
We will bring back faith in our justice system for the citizens.
I was shocked beyond words. Even after all that we've seen from the president over the past 8 years, to watch him stand in the Great Hall of the Department of Justice, a sacred place in America, and claim that now he was going to get even by politicizing and weaponizing the Department of Justice and the FBI against his political enemies was a travesty in all of American history.
I happen to think President Trump should go there every week. They are shocked that he's in the sacred temple of the Justice Department. Them, right? This is what democracy is about. These are anti-democratic forces. They have to be broken. They are shocked because the President of the United States, and worst of all, Donald Trump, actually soiled their temple by going in there. He's President of the United States. He's the Chief Magistrate and the Chief Law Enforcement Officer by the Constitution.
The message could not have been clearer. Donald Trump is now in charge at Justice.
Outside Washington, Trump was also exercising power over the DOJ, targeting its most prominent office in New York City.
There are 93 U.S. areas across the country, but the Southern District of New York is the most prominent in the country, often called the Sovereign District, because for so long, the Southern District has acted with a kind of independence from main justice in D.C. that other offices have only dreamed of matching.
The case, the prosecution of New York City's Democratic Mayor, Eric Adams.
The charges against Eric Adams were brought by the Southern District of New York. I think it's the first time that there's been a federal indictment against a sitting mayor of New York City, and charged with corruption charges, with bribery, all high profile.
And Eric Adams went down to Mar-a-Lago to appeal to Trump, and his lawyers made a case to the new team at the Justice Department that this case was interfering with Eric Adams' ability to help Trump in his mass deportation agenda. And they made a deal.
The deal that they came up with was one of the most transparent quid pro quos that you could possibly imagine. We made a deal to drop this prosecution, and in exchange, he's going to help us.
Emil Bove, the acting deputy attorney general, sent a memorandum that the case should be dismissed so that Mayor Adams could help the president achieve his immigration agenda in New York City.
The pending prosecution has unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration and violent crime.
And that's as nakedly political a rationale as you could imagine. What it says is that because Mayor Adams has said he's supporting the president's immigration agenda, he doesn't get prosecuted. But presumably, if he had been an opponent of the president's immigration agenda, he would have been prosecuted.
Bove's memo went straight to the desk of acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon.
Danielle Sassoon, who had been appointed by Trump, a conservative attorney, member of the Federalist Society, clerked for Supreme Court Justice Scalia. She tried to convince DOJ, appealing directly and sort of going around Bove to Bondi and saying, this is not how criminal law should be used.
The reasons advanced by Mr. Bove for dismissing the indictment are not ones I can in good faith defend.
That's when the issue catapulted into national prominence. It's when conservative lawyers and the Department of Justice objected to this because they knew what this was. They knew this was a quid pro quo, and that was deeply unethical.
Because the law does not support a dismissal, I cannot agree to seek a dismissal driven by improper considerations. Very truly yours, Danielle R. Sassoon.
Danielle Sassoon was not the kind of person who you would have thought was going to stand up to Donald Trump, at least not politically. But she believed in the rule of law, and she saw this as a corruption, and she said, I want no part of it.
Bondi refused to even meet with Sassoon. In her letter, Danielle had said, if you're not going to meet with me, if you're not going to reconsider this, then I will resign. She then got a letter from Bove, which said, okay, I accept your resignation.
The Justice Department will not tolerate the insubordination and apparent misconduct reflected in the approach that you and your office have taken in this matter.
I would say to Danielle Sassoon and the others that they work for the Deputy Attorney General, who works for the Attorney General, who works for the President, who's elected by all Americans. And if you don't like that, then get out of the Justice Department.
And many would. Nearly a dozen prosecutors in New York and Washington resigned or were forced out.
People in the Department of Justice don't just up and resign. When you resign, it's because it's either, in your view, amoral or it's a quid pro quo that you think is illegal. And that is the reason that you saw so many career people, including conservatives, say, I can't stomach this.
Upheaval in the Justice Department.
A showdown between the Trump administration and its own Justice Department prosecutors.
They wanted prosecutors across the country to see that this time around they would not be standing for any pushback, that they would not be permitting offices, even the Southern District of New York, to push back against main justice, and that if you did stand up, then you would lose your careers. It's all about sending the chilling effect across the department and across the country.
That sweeping federal corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams is now officially dead.
Mayor Adams denied there'd been a quid pro quo or that he'd done anything wrong. But regardless of guilt or innocence, for the advocates of the unitary executive, Trump's decision was well within his power.
I think the criticism of Trump deciding not to prosecute Adams is way overblown. The president and the Justice Department have the right to choose who to prosecute and not to prosecute. The president says, don't prosecute this person. That is not illegal or unconstitutional. That's certainly constitutional. And presidents can do it for reasons that don't have to do with guilt or innocence.
The message out there to the public is, even if you've committed a serious crime, if you support the administration politically, you can get off. If you haven't, we'll throw the book at you, but if you've supported the administration politically, you may get off. It sends that message to the public at large.
From now on, there is no concept of an independent law enforcement function in this country. It exists purely to carry out the personal will of the president. The era that began with the disgrace of Richard Nixon and the forcing from office of a president who sought to use the machinery of government on his own behalf, era is over, very definitively.
Trump's transformation of the government and his use of presidential power would be far-reaching.
When Trump came into power, he was surrounded by ideologues who have been nursing these theories for quite some time that are really quite extreme. One of the principal ones is a man named Russell Vought. He is someone who is a self-described Christian nationalist who has been around Washington for a long time. He's seen how government works. And he has an idea of really kind of radical changes he wants to implement. And he's someone who knows how to do it.
My belief is that the president has to move executively as fast and as aggressively as possible with a radical constitutional perspective to be able to dismantle that bureaucracy in their power centers.
Before the election, Vought laid out his vision in a chapter he wrote for the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, a blueprint for Trump's return.
The great challenge confronting a conservative president is the existential need for aggressive use of the vast powers of the executive branch.
He told us quite explicitly he wants to search out for pockets of independence from presidential control and stamp them out. He's made no secret of the fact that he wants to wrest for the presidency more power over spending decisions away from Congress.
Trump and people around him understand what we have to do to get back to a constitutional republic. We're going after the infrastructure and the plumbing and the wiring of the whole system. We are not going to quit. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to take our foot off the gas pedal.
Now, with Russell Vought the head of the powerful Office of Management and Budget, Trump would take on departments Congress had authorized and funded, starting with the agency that handled foreign aid, USAID.
President Donald Trump is calling for USAID to be shut down, calling the organization that delivers aid to people around the world corrupt.
Many people see as frivolous, if not outright wasteful spending. Shutdown of USAID could mean less medicine for the sick and less food for starving families, including babies.
This is a power grab. You're watching the presidency turned into something much more imperial than we've seen for a very long time, and maybe ever.
The Trump administration's efforts to reshape the federal government and its workforce.
USAID's workforce will be whittled down from about 14,000 employees to fewer than 300, a 98% cut.
Large chunks of USAID employees were placed on administrative leave and cut off from agency email systems and other databases. We had hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in play around the world in ongoing programs, all came to a dead stop.
Paul Martin, USAID's Inspector General, had spent decades in government, but had never seen anything like this.
People have dedicated their lives trying to make a difference at USAID, and to sort of overnight, without any engagement, without any warning, it was a massive shock to the system.
Hundreds of workers at USAID are cleaning out their desks.
An emotional exodus at the former headquarters of USAID. Recently fired federal workers were given just 15 minutes to clear out their desks.
I do think that USAID was the canary in the coal mine. The speed and the rapidity at which this occurred was pretty breathtaking.
A senior official at USAID called it a mafia-like takeover.
It's less than 1% of the federal budget. The fact that this was the very first agency they chose to target and force underscores that this is not a cost-cutting exercise. It's an exercise in power. It was a classic demonstration execution. We'll kill one federal agency in order to terrify thousands of others.
When Congress establishes an agency by law, that's not optional. That's a law, and the agency exists and then it has to discharge the responsibilities that Congress has given it. So when the president tries just to shut down an agency that has statutory responsibilities, that will in many cases be inconsistent with the law. What's the point of having the authority to enact laws, which is Congress's big power, if the president can then disregard whatever they enact.
Go back to the unitary theory of the executive. The President of the United States, as chief executive, has the ability to make personnel decisions and to fire anybody. You don't have permanent employment in the federal government.
USAID was the perfect political target from their point of view. A lot of Americans don't feel all that aggrieved by that. And so, yeah, it was a test case and wanted to see how far he could go.
As he cleared the ranks at USAID, there was one more target. The agency's independent watchdog.
I too received a 2-sentence email thanking me for my service, but dismissing me as Inspector General.
Dear Paul, on behalf of President Donald J. Trump, I am writing to inform you that your position as Inspector General is terminated effective immediately. Thank you for your service.
No explanation, no 30-day notice, no reasons.
It seems pretty clear violation of the law. You can fire inspectors general, but you have to notify the Senate. You have to give 30 days notice. He was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
From agencies all over Washington, 17 other inspectors general were purged.
The Inspector General community has been a concept created by Congress to help Congress and the administration conduct meaningful, effective oversight of federal taxpayer spending in executive branch agencies. We are Congress's eyes and ears. When you dismiss 17 Inspector Generals, you've turned the system on its head.
The role of Inspector General was created by Congress. It is a response to the Watergate scandal. And often Congress will ask IG offices to conduct investigations that Congress doesn't have the staff or the power or the ability to do because they're not housed inside these agencies. So firing the IGs isn't just about creating a less transparent government, but also really cuts off a channel to Congress.
These inspector generals are a great example of these Watergate reforms that tried to chip away at the unitary executive. If the president can't fire them, then they don't have to listen to the president. They don't have to take orders or direction from the president. And that, I think, is really an affront to the idea of a unitary executive.
What he's doing is systematically removing any instrument of independent accountability in the government. If Congress was healthy at all, it should rise up and say, our creations, we're going to protect our creations.
There really is no dissent, certainly within the Republican Party, which is what controls Washington. Lawmakers are almost uniformly aligned behind the president right now, and they also see that there's almost no upside to being publicly critical of the president.
This is not a usurpation of authority in any way. It's not a power grab. I think they're doing what we've all expected and hoped and asked that they would do.
Congress under the Constitution has plenty of authority to fight for itself. The founders wanted the president and Congress to fight. What they did not anticipate was political parties. The reason why Congress isn't fighting now, if people want Congress to fight more, is that Congress is controlled by the same party as the president. Congress, the majority of the House and Senate, probably agree with what the president's doing.
President Donald Trump is delivering on his promise to shake up the status quo in Washington.
I think all of us believe that we want to be good partners in making sure that the agenda that he campaigned on, and which the American people voted for, is accomplished and delivered on.
The fact that the Congress of the United States is silent is unforgivable. The system created under the Constitution was one of separated powers under which each branch serves as a check and balance on the other branches. Right now in America, one could not say that we have the separation of powers that was envisioned by our founders and written into the Constitution of the United States.
Without a functioning Congress, without an independent Justice Department, without inspectors general watching things, literally the only real check on a president's power at this point would be the courts.
It would be up to the lawyers to confront Trump.
When I saw the dismantling of USAID, I said, I'm gonna sue, I'm gonna go to court, I'm gonna file a case, I'm gonna argue this is against the Constitution. It's against what Congress has commanded. No element of Donald Trump's attacks are gonna go unmet. We're gonna litigate it and win, and we did.
President Trump was dealt not one, but 3 legal defeats in the span of just 90 minutes yesterday.
The legal challenges to the president's efforts to reshape the government mounting.
In the first months of the Trump administration, at this point, there's almost 200 lawsuits that are on file. And whether it's Democratic or Republican judges who are deciding them, Donald Trump is losing the majority of the time.
The battle significantly slowing down the president's efforts to downsize the government.
The lawyers are part of the problem. These lawyers and these law firms are oftentimes partisan actors, and they are coming up with plaintiffs to sabotage the President of the United States.
Trump would send a message to the lawyers, attacking powerful law firms that had crossed him in the past.
Well, they signed some executive orders. What they've done is it's just terrible, and it should never be allowed to happen again.
He ordered the firm's security clearances revoked, that they be denied entrance to all federal buildings, their government contracts canceled.
This is just gangster stuff. I mean, it really is. This is mob-style intimidation. Because what it is saying, nakedly, is that I can essentially destroy the law firm.
And you're looking at about 15 different firms?
That or more, sir, yes.
Okay.
I am so impressed. The power of what President Trump did, I was stunned of how brilliantly thoughtful it was.
What the firms need to understand is that if I were their clients, I would probably find new attorneys, because if you've made it on one of these lists, you're probably not going to get a very good reception of the Trump administration for the next 4 years. The law firm of Jenner and Block, this is a law firm that, as you know, employed Andrew Weissman after he came off of the Mueller investigation. He is one of a number of reasons that we believe this executive order is warranted.
He's a bad guy.
That is really insidious. That is saying that I'm going to target you if you take positions and bring cases in front of judges. In order to have a functioning judiciary, you need to have lawyers who don't feel threatened by bringing good faith litigation.
This is an executive order that takes certain measures against Sussman Godfrey, given their previous activities.
These attacks on the nation's law firms are intended to put the individual firms out of business. But then larger, to send a message to the nation's 1.2 million lawyers that they better never take again a case representing a client against Donald Trump and his administration.
Some firms fought back.
Hundreds of firms denouncing the president's executive orders.
Some even won in court. But the vast majority of the country's largest law firms stayed silent.
Some firms fighting back, while others are bending the knee to Trump.
By and large, the legal industry has kind of folded.
These orders are certainly unlawful, and a judge has already said so. But it's very difficult for courts to really remedy the situation, because at the end of the day, even when a court says that an order like this is unlawful, everybody still knows that the law firm is persona non grata, in fact toxic, inside the administration.
Several of the firms have come to the White House seeking a way to avoid punishment.
Always. Now reaching a deal with the president to get the president to drop the executive order against the firm.
After that was sent, they collapsed in their opposition. And here's what I tell people. They're not that powerful. This whole system has been so powerful and so overwhelming. They cratered the most powerful law firms in the country.
The word that largely defines the response is capitulation.
5 more law firms have now struck deals with the Trump administration.
It sent a message to the administration that this works, meaning do it again.
The law firms claimed the deals didn't threaten their independence and denied they were payoffs to Trump.
Have you noticed that lots of law firms have been signing up with Trump? They give you $100 million and then they announce that, but we have done nothing wrong, and I agree, they've done nothing wrong. But what the hell? They give me a lot of money considering they've done nothing wrong.
Altogether, they agreed to give nearly $1 billion in legal services to causes that the firms and Trump support.
All in an effort to sort of appease him and keep him from criticizing them or targeting them.
I want these lawyers to understand that this is not the George W. Bush Republican Party. We're not going to turn the other cheek. The American people elected President Trump with a broad mandate. So, time to deliver.
All American people should be worried about what we're saying. I know lawyers are not the most favored group in society, but lawyers are who you go to when you need your rights defended. Lawyers are who you go to when you need to access the courts. And I think it begins with lawyers, but this kind of trend will expand across the board.
He is extending his reach really far, much further than most presidents have. And it's not just on politics. What's striking is how much he wants to impose his point of view on different aspects of society. He is trying to reshape the country in a way. It's not just whether the USAID should be an agency or not. It's what should be played at the Kennedy Center.
President Trump now is the chair of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.
Trump plans to fire Kennedy Center board members, appoint himself as chair.
It's what we should call a body of water off our southern shores.
President Trump is calling it the Gulf of America as opposed to the Gulf of Mexico.
It's what the Associated Press can put in a style guide.
Trump has barred the Associated Press from the Oval Office and White House press pool.
It's what is taught in the classrooms at Columbia.
Columbia University will comply with policy changes demanded by the Trump administration.
Trump calling for Harvard to lose its tax-exempt status.
He wants to have everybody defer to him.
Paramount announcing they will settle President Trump's lawsuit over a 60 Minutes interview for $16 million.
And he is accomplishing a lot. And a lot of his people are very happy about that.
Here's what we know. If you take power and exert it, this system's not so tough. You know why? They're all gutless cowards. The university administrators, they're not that tough. The big law firms, they're not that tough. The media, look who's cratered. How many times? Look how they're settling with Trump. They're not tough. We're resilient, we're anti-fragile, and we're tough. The people around Trump are battle-hardened, okay? You're not gonna scare us, and we're not gonna stop. And what we know is you guys are a bunch of... You will crater. PBS is gonna crater. You don't believe actually at your core in what you're trying to do. And you'll fold, like the law firms, like the universities, like the media, like all of these institutions. You will fold, because we're relentless, and we're not gonna stop.
PBS and NPR sued Trump over his attempts to defund them. Harvard also refused to back down. And many of Trump's efforts were blocked by courts. But he has been pressing ahead.
Our golden age has only just begun. We will never give in. We will never give up. We will never back down. We will never, ever surrender. We will fight, 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 and we will win, win, win. Together, we will make America powerful again.
This is new territory for people. And a lot of people are very courageous in their heads, when they imagine themselves facing the government, but then when the actual reality is looming in front of them, when the actual crushing weight of the federal government comes upon you, or the thought that you could be publicly named and shamed in a way that could bring threats and intimidation to your family, an awful lot of people are going to say, well, somebody else can take on this thing.
I've lived in Washington my whole life. I've never seen people in Washington scared the way they are now. I've never seen people in Washington as scared as they are now. They are scared to talk. They are scared to pop their head up. They are scared to be noticed. They don't want to be on his radar screen because they fear that he will use his power against them. When I call people to talk to them and quote them in a story, they say, hey, I can't be on the record anymore. I have a kid who works in the government. I have a brother who has a federal grant. My law firm doesn't want me to talk. I'm scared, they say. I don't want to be prosecuted. I've never seen that before in Washington. It's never been a situation where adversaries of the president, Democrat or Republican, felt afraid in the same way we're seeing now across the board to speak their mind.
He was attacking government agencies, overpowering Congress, threatening law firms, the press, and more. Trump's far-reaching use of presidential power was leading to confrontation with the Supreme Court.
I think the administration is seeking an opportunity to create a constitutional crisis. By that I mean a crisis that tests the scope of the judicial power to control the executive. That's why the attack on the rule of law is really Trump's focus now.
Trump's test case, an unprecedented campaign against illegal immigration.
A massive immigration enforcement crackdown has led to hundreds of arrests in a matter of days.
The administration claimed it was targeting violent gangs and criminals.
You had President Trump rounding up international gangbangers. They are robbing, kidnapping, raping, torturing, and murdering Americans. The president has absolute statutory and constitutional authority to get them the hell out of our country.
But many others were being swept up too.
Immigrants with legal status or no criminal history are also being detained and deported.
Many of the deported men lack criminal records in the United States, according to ICE.
The families of some of those men deported say not all of them are gang members.
How do you know that this person in front of you actually is a gang member? What if they say they're not? Do they have a right to some kind of process to go before a judge and say, mistaken identity, I'm just a barber, or I'm just a soccer player. This tattoo you say is a gang tattoo is just my favorite team. What's your proof?
They are. They are deporting people they've said are very dangerous gang members. But everyone in the country who's accused of something has basic rights of due process, which in this case would mean a hearing to determine whether they are in fact members of this gang and whether they are subject to deportation under the law. That's the process that the administration has tried to short circuit.
He's saying, all I'm doing is deporting criminal gangs, or I'm taking action against murderers and rapists. And it's very hard to get people worked up over concepts like due process, a legal term, right? But you know who does get very, very agitated about due process? Judges.
In an emergency lawsuit, ACLU lawyers presented federal Judge Jeb Boasberg with startling evidence. The government was racing to deport alleged gang members to a notorious prison in El Salvador without any judicial review.
Trump was rushing people onto planes. Judge Boasberg said, slow down, temporary restraining order, let's figure out, let's freeze the status quo into place, let's figure out whether this is legal or not. you need to turn those planes around, bring these people back to the United States. And the Trump administration did not turn the planes around. They handed more than 100 people off to a prison in El Salvador. So that raises the question, not only was this legal to do in the first place, but did they violate a court order?
That was an extraordinary act. Virtually all presidents throughout history have acknowledged that you have to obey court orders, that if you disagree with a court order, it's not optional to refuse to comply with it. The answer is to appeal.
It's very close to just the kind of clash that everybody's fearing between the executive branch and the judicial branch. It seems possible that for the first time in the United States history, a president might just say he's not going to listen to the courts.
I'm happy those planes landed in El Salvador because the president had a constitutional duty to ignore that lawless and dangerous order and land those planes in El Salvador. This Boasberg, the clown, thinks he's the commander-in-chief. He thinks he can order the president to turn around military planes carrying terrorists. What the hell is Jeb Boasberg thinking that he thinks he can expose and sabotage an ongoing military operation? Judge Boasberg does not have the jurisdiction to do what he did. He did not have the power to do what he did, and what he did was lawless.
The judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil.
Judge Boasberg fired back, ruling there was probable cause the administration was guilty of criminal contempt. And Boasberg wasn't alone.
The immigration standoff is heating up between the Trump administration and the courts.
Court after court, ruling against Trump.
U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy ruled the U.S. government must retain custody of migrants,
challenging the deportations.
The federal judge appointed by President Trump blocked the administration from summarily removing migrants in South Texas,
finding the administration was violating people's due process rights.
A federal judge says the Trump administration violated a court order for again sending migrants to a country they're not from without due process.
The Trump administration is now formally complying with the Supreme Court order to bring back Abrego Garcia.
This is a victory for due process. It's a victory for the Constitution.
The American public may not even know it as due process, but they know that whenever the government comes against them, whether it be in a criminal proceeding, a civil proceeding, where the government intends to take away your property or your liberty, that you're entitled to be heard. The Trump administration does not want to give those people the opportunity simply to make their case to the federal government that they're not members of the gang at all. That's about as rudimentary and fundamental to America as anything that I can conceive of.
Despite the challenges, Trump and his team haven't let up.
And the question should be, why is a judge trying to protect terrorists who have invaded our country over American citizens?
The broadest theme that arises from it is a White House that is unafraid to provoke legal challenges and enjoys the fight as an into itself, is not embarrassed by the prospect that it might be accused of doing something illegal, but revels in it.
We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
I deplore the rhetoric that suggests that anyone in the government doesn't have to follow the Constitution or the laws or obey court orders. I think it would be a dangerous path for our country if any president starts saying they're going to act outside the Constitution. And so I hope it's just careless rhetoric.
We have bad judges. We have very bad judges, and these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge.
The Trump administration is escalating its fight with federal judges.
Trump suggested that the judges, including one he appointed, were backroom hustlers.
He went after the Federalist Society, a longtime ally that had helped him select judicial appointments.
Why is he attacking the Federalist Society when it was an ally in the first term?
Trump wrote on Truth Social, "I am so disappointed in the Federalist Society because of the bad advice they gave me on judicial nominations."
It seems like what Trump wants is just judges who will agree with him.
Loyal to him.
Loyal to him.
You have to think that it's a knowing effort on the part of Trump to delegitimize the power of the judiciary. I mean, what he's basically also saying is that there is no such thing as neutral law or principled law. It's all just politics. And that's basically Trump's view of judges.
This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator, was not elected president. This judge should be impeached.
This is unequivocally, indisputably, an attack by the president on the independence of the federal judiciary, pure and simple.
Amidst the attacks, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts issued an extraordinary rebuke to the president.
Impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose.
Even Chief Justice John Roberts, who doesn't enter the political fray very often, felt compelled within hours to put out his own statement saying, "You don't agree with this ruling? You go to the appeals court. You don't like the appeals court, you come to me, the Supreme Court, and we'll deal with it." What he did there was lay down a marker. Because what he said is, this isn't about Judge Boasberg. It's not about a rogue judge the way the president would like it to be. It's about the whole system. And Roberts took that arrow for himself. He was saying, it's about us. It's about the system. And do you respect the system?
Justice Roberts needs to remember that he is a federal judge. He's not a politician. And when judges take off their judicial robes and climb into the political arena and throw political punches, they can expect political counterpunches. And so it's probably not a good idea for judges to make political statements like he does.
Now, Chief Justice Roberts, who had written that pivotal presidential immunity decision a year before, is the face of a court at a crossroads.
It's a little bit hard to reconcile Justice Roberts, who has claimed to stand for the balance of powers in our system, with the same man who wrote this decision granting Donald Trump sweeping unfettered power. And now it seems to me that with many of these actions that Trump is undertaking, he's seeking to test the Supreme Court. Did you really mean it?
The last democratic institution that remains between us and the precipice of a constitutional crisis is the Supreme Court.
There have been more than 300 lawsuits filed against the Trump administration since he took office.
All the big cases are going to end up in front of the Supreme Court eventually.
These legal challenges are making their way to the appellate process. Some will land in the Supreme Court.
Chief Justice Roberts is on the hot seat because the judiciary doesn't have the powers of the purse and it doesn't have an army. So the only thing it has is its own legitimacy. And so they don't want to be in a position where they make a decision and Trump defies it, because then it makes them look like a paper tiger. So it's a tight spot.
What happens if there's a definitive ruling and Trump just decides, I don't care?
The president has acted as prosecutor and judge, but he's going to have to understand at the end of the day that for the federal judiciary to yield to him would literally be to surrender its constitutional role to Donald Trump. That's simply never going to happen.
But the president and his advisors are betting that the Supreme Court will see it otherwise.
They want to get a lot of these challenges into the courts because they believe that the Supreme Court, with a conservative 6-3 makeup, is a more friendly place to wager some of these fights over executive power. And I think that a lot of the people around the president have a higher degree of confidence now that the Supreme Court will rule in their favor and ultimately codify the expansive presidential power.
There's nothing to compromise.
¿Te falta algo para tu despensa? Descarga la app de Sam's Club y encuentra cientos de productos exclusivos. Suma todos tus favoritos al carrito y haz tu pedido. Recíbelo en la puerta de tu casa en menos de 2 horas.
There's two different theories about what the Constitution says, what the framers had in mind, and what this country is. It's going to build up to a crescendo. One side's going to win, and one side's going to lose. Trump is not only not going to blink, he's going to win.
A big win for the Trump administration. The Supreme Court slammed the brakes, saying no to nationwide injunctions.
And in the final days of the Supreme Court's term,
The Supreme Court potentially cleared the way for even greater presidential power.
victories for now.
The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Trump administration's efforts to deport migrants to third countries.
The White House is claiming victory after the Supreme Court allowed the White House to move forward with the mass layoffs of federal workers.
The battle here may on the face be between Trump versus the courts or Trump versus the rule of law. But this is the battle for what is going to be normal in America. What are our norms? What is our system of government that we are all going to subject ourselves to? Do we have the rule of law or do we have royal decrees? That's what's at stake here.
President Trump seems to be riding a major wave of momentum these past couple of weeks.
The Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to move forward with its staffing cuts at the Department of Education.
The FBI is now investigating former FBI Director James Comey in conjunction with the genesis of the Russia investigation.
In Los Angeles, tensions flaring after President Trump deployed National Guard troops.
Our constitutional structure is definitely stressed. And how it emerges from that will really depend on how the public understands and reacts to what's going on. Ultimately, we're a democracy, and our government is never going to be much better or much worse than what people want it to be. So I think ultimately the question is, how does the country decide to understand what it sees happening around it, and how does it react to that?
And other Frontline programs, visit our website at pbs.org/frontline. Frontline's Trump's Power and the Rule of Law is available on Amazon Prime Video.
Projected to be the next president of the United States. Tonight on Frontline,
They thought success would breed success.
We'll move for a quick kill, that's how they refer to it, a quick kill on Capitol Hill.
Their leadership told the members, no, just say no.
there was a polarizing quality about Barack Obama that came roaring forward.
He was in a position to make demands, and he didn't.
He's the first Nobel Peace Prize winner with a kill list. I think he understands that the glory days are over. Everything's going to be more challenging.
Now he gets another chance to be the guy who united the country.
In the week before his inauguration, a look back inside Obama's presidency.
Good evening, everyone. everyone. As we watch the making of the president 2008, there are 10 key
Senator scheduled tonight is now at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. He will watch the election returns in Ohio. It's gone for now 11 o'clock on the East Coast. Keith, we can report this.
Barack Obama is projected to be the next president.
Senator Barack Obama of Illinois will be the next.
November 4th, 2008. On this night in Chicago, inside Barack Obama's private world, the news began to sink in.
And I kept watching Obama as he transformed from this young man to the next president of the United States. This was a different man.
President of the United States.
Tens of thousands, so maybe hundreds of thousands who have gathered in Grant Park in Chicago.
Only 4 years earlier, he'd been a state legislator.
The look on his face, to me, looked like someone who finally understood the weight of the job that he had just won.
Almost as if the weight of the world had rested on his shoulders.
The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. 2 wars, a planet in peril, the worst financial crisis in a century. But America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
If he had any idea that night how difficult this would be, the next day would prove it.
So much for that election day euphoria.
The economy has now lost 650,000 jobs just in the past 3 months.
And all eyes are now on Barack Obama to turn it around.
A cascade of bad news began with the economy.
And fear swept through the markets, and the
You had to start thinking about this the day after he was elected. This was the most eventful and consequential presidential transition in American history.
We were all worried about what we were seeing. We knew that the credit system was pretty quickly headed towards something that looked a lot like seizure.
The president-elect was told that in the 2 months since Lehman Brothers crashed, the panic on Wall Street had only gotten worse.
What we were facing was something that really had never contemplated, never experienced.
Unemployment was nearly 7% and climbing. The stock market was down more than 6,000 points.
There was a growing sense of calamity. This could be the most climactic economic crisis in all of American history, that we were that close to a complete meltdown.
Obama at that moment gets a real glimpse of the future. Disaster's coming. At the end of the conversation, there's basically no bright spots. And I say to the then president-elect, wow, that had to have been the worst economic briefing a new president's had in almost a century. And president says, that's not even my worst briefing this week.
There were the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the pursuit of Al-Qaeda, and above all, a huge political challenge.
Bring the change we need to Washington. We are ready to take this country in a fundamentally...
During the campaign, he had promised Americans he would fix the partisanship that plagued and divided Washington.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. Let's go change the world.
It's Inauguration Day of the nation's first African-American president.
This is the biggest inaugural of all time in a country that likes the word
The first couple to arrive at the neighborhood ball. The first
On the very night Barack Obama was inaugurated,
is among the headliners, and
a group of Republicans quietly gathered to develop plans for taking on the new president.
A meeting and dinner took place in the famous steakhouse in downtown Washington, with Newt Gingrich as sort of the MC, as it were.
The thing I found disturbing this week was
At the gathering of GOP luminaries, top conservative Congressman Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy,
I think Republicans ought to be the loyal opposition.
Paul Ryan,
Republicans ought to be better alternative parties.
Senate power brokers Jim DeMint,
I think the biggest fight will be over
John Kyle,
The biggest fight there will be over the energy.
Tom Coburn, and event organizer Frank Luntz.
The room was filled. It was a who's who of ranking members who had at one point been committee chairman or in the majority, who now wondered out loud whether they were in the permanent minority.
44th President of these United States,
Many of them had attended Obama's inauguration. They had seen that breathtaking spectacle of 1.5 million people on the mall, and it felt like a wholesale repudiation of the Republican Party.
They walked into that dining room as depressed as I've seen any elected members of Congress. They lost every Senate seat they could lose. They lost all these House seats. The numbers were so great that they thought that they weren't coming back again, not for an election or two, but maybe a generation or two.
As the night wore on, the talk turned to the future.
3 hours, some of the brightest minds in the Republican Party debated how to be relevant.
The point I made was that we had to be prepared in the tradition of Wooden at UCLA to run a full court press. And we had to see how Obama behaved and to offer an alternative to what he wanted to do.
So they decided that they needed to begin to fight Obama on everything. This meant unyielding opposition to every one of the Obama administration's legislative initiatives.
And he could be defeated partly by his own ideology and by his own behaviors.
The feeling was that if that group could cooperate and if that group could lead, that the wilderness might not be a generation away.
By the end of the evening, you began to reorient and realize, wait a second, you got Nancy Pelosi as an opponent. You got, you have a clear choice of ideologies. We have a tremendous amount of hard work to do, but it's doable.
They all talked about this, and they began to get more and more optimistic, and they left feeling practically exuberant.
Inauguration day full of events. 10 official.
Across Washington that evening,
Stunning crowd of people listening.
the new president had no idea what the Republicans were planning.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Surrounded by supporters at the inaugural balls, the mood was hopeful.
Obama did not have a full sense of what Washington was going to be like for him. He had not been in the middle of these kind of down and dirty fights. The ugly reality of governing in Washington today.
You have, in Obama's case, gone within 4 years from being an Illinois state politician to the most famous person on earth. And you have confidence in both your judgment about what's the right way to go and your ability to make it go that way. If he was too confident about being able to bring people together, one can understand given the way he'd spent the previous 4 years.
Ball gowns are on their way to the cleaners. The party is over for both the new president and...
What does Obama need to do to reassure Americans right now?
That first week, the president had 2 goals.
This is an ambitious
Turn the economy around.
So we're talking about massive.
And do it by working together with the Republicans.
So he's got some selling to do.
The big debate in Washington is how big should the stimulus package be?
He is facing many sobering challenges.
You're hammering out details for his massive economic recovery.
He knew that he was dealing with a set of circumstances that required people to put politics aside and to address this crisis before it got worse.
This is a particular challenge.
He put together a huge $800 billion stimulus package designed to kickstart the economy. And he tailored it to appeal to the Republicans.
Obama thought, you know what, I'm going to start off with something that is going to look pretty appealing to these guys. I'm going to have about 35-40% of this $800 billion package be in the form of tax cuts. A lot of Democrats are going to hate that, but Republicans like tax cuts, and we can just get everybody on board from the beginning.
He was told right from the start, the stakes couldn't be higher.
This is the first of a series of tests, and if he failed this one, what would it say for his administration and his ability to deal with all the other challenges we're going to face?
President Obama promised the American people he would bring bipartisan solutions.
He decided to make a symbolic gesture.
He went from the White House to
He'd come to them.
Mr. Obama is hoping for support from both sides of the aisle.
Take his proposal to the Republicans on their own turf.
He'll to try and sell his plan to Republicans.
He headed right for the meeting of the Republican caucus.
It's a rare day when a president goes to the Capitol to meet only with members of the other party.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
He spoke extemporaneously about the stimulus. He walked us through it, probably 15 or 20 minutes, just his thought process and why he was advocating these policies. And then he opened it up for questions.
The Republicans were ready for him.
And it was really during that Q&A as the members stepped forward and asked some pretty, I think, appropriate questions about the amount of money that we were spending, the debt that would be taken on. And I don't ever remember him saying, okay, we'll take a look at that. It was more just defending his proposal as is.
And the Republicans had a surprise for the new president.
He arrives there thinking they're all going to talk and come up with some kind of agreement. He's got all these tax cuts to offer them. And he finds that they've already had a meeting and decided they're going to oppose the stimulus package. And he was deeply burned by it.
Before he showed up, Eric Cantor sent out an email. Said, I'm voting against it. Eric Cantor's emails were against this.
Their leadership told the members, we're not for any of it. No matter what it is, no. Just say no.
He came out empty-handed and had to face the waiting press corps.
We had a wonderful exchange of ideas, and I continue to be optimistic about our ability to get this recovery package done.
And we saw the president standing in the halls of the Senate in the Capitol. I'll never forget that. He still looked like a senator. Of course, he's now the president of the United States. What's he even doing or lobbying for this?
I think everybody there felt good about that I was willing to explain how we put the package together, how we were thinking about it, and we continue to welcome good ideas.
It was a very strong signal that we were not going to get a lot of cooperation on this issue, and if we weren't going to get it on this issue, it was doubtful that we were going to get it on many others.
On this vote, the yeas are 246.
But Obama's party controlled the Congress.
The conference report is adopted.
And without a single Republican vote in the House, the stimulus bill passed.
So much for the president's charm offensive. Today it was all partisan rancor and name-calling.
One Republican voted for it, turning a cold shoulder to the president's appeal for bipartisan support.
Obama learns that being president is about understanding the constraints and, frankly, working the system rather than changing the system.
Growing backlash against Wall Street. As for the compensation for the CEOs at four of the biggest banks.
About $18.4 billion in bonuses.
Then, just a few weeks into his presidency,
itself big bonuses.
Another Wall Street problem.
Frustration with the economy.
The huge bonuses.
Highest total on record.
The bonuses fueled public anger over the hundreds of billions of dollars in federal bailouts initiated by the Bush administration.
It really, really grates with most people that our tax money went to support these institutions. And then when the rest of the country was in the worst of the recession, you saw the big traders and the heads of the Goldman Sachs of the world walking out with these multi-million-dollar pay packages.
Do the banks need to be held accountable for their party?
And in Washington, the news about the banker bonuses
millions in bonuses
didn't go over well in the Oval Office.
Employees got more than $18 billion in bonuses in 2000.
The bonus and the compensation stuff made him more angry than I'd ever seen him. I remember him really standing up out of his chair in the Oval Office and just being really pretty livid. I mean, the one thing he would not stand for was, the American people being played for as chumps by these banks, and that was something he just really didn't like.
Some on the president's staff saw this as an opportunity to get tough on the banks.
David Axelrod, Obama's top political advisor, very much wanted some scalps. Robert Gibbs, who was the press secretary but also a very senior political aide, wanted scalps.
White House economic advisor Larry Summers pushed the president to take strong action, even seizing a troubled bank.
One school of thought was, well, we need to take over, to shut down, to nationalize the weakest of the banks. Wall Street would see that if you gamble with the country's fortunes and you fail, you're going to get shut down, you're going to lose.
But there was a deep divide among the president's economic advisors. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner urged Obama to take a cautious approach.
Geithner didn't want to do it because it would kind of create this risk. It would create this conception that the government was going to come in and mess with these banks and that would frighten off private investors.
Only the president could make the decision. Bold action against Wall Street banks or cautious support to strengthen them. While the bankers waited, Obama kept his own counsel.
For the economy, this is what free fall feels like.
When will the recession end? Well, to help us
The nation's top bankers were summoned to the White House.
Cited 15 of the family after leveling some very harsh words to the White
The
House.
president wanted to talk to them.
looking for accountability from the nation's banking leaders. Today, President Obama
13 bankers were called into a room to meet with the President of the United States. They were told that they were going to be chastised, that this was going to be the opportunity for the President to vent the public's anger.
They headed some of the largest banks in the country. Throughout the crisis, they had received massive bailouts.
Walking into that meeting, these guys have not been this nervous since they're in nursery school. They're ultimately powerful sovereign men atop their institutions, but now they know that they really could get whacked.
No one knew what to expect. Summer's bold action or Geithner's cautious encouragement. Now they'd find out what the new president wanted to do.
Obama comes in and he's all business.
Obviously, there were few pleasantries exchanged. Obama spoke first.
The President made it pretty clear when he talked to us, we're between you and the pitchforks, guys, and you need to just acknowledge that. The bankers have essentially made a decision that they're prepared to go along with what needs to be done to resolve this problem, to get the public back on the side of corporate America.
But as the meeting progressed, to their astonishment, it became clear the president was in no mood for confrontation.
What's interesting is that the next statements and the rest of the meeting essentially is Obama skinning back as fast as he can on that pitchforks punch. And he says, right after that, what we have, gentlemen, is a public relations disaster that's turning into a political disaster. And I'm here to help.
I interpret it as kind of a watershed time. Banks are the catalyst to get us out of this morass that we're in. You can talk so long about the past, but at some point you got to look at the present and the future. And I thought that's what he was saying.
The president had decided he would wait on reforming Wall Street and adopt the cautious approach.
I think the president sees himself as a pragmatist. Let's get through this. Let's be pragmatic. Let's not shoot for the moon and miss. Let's accomplish as much as we can, but let's do it with the certainty that we know we can produce by taking this a little more cautiously.
And the president required no firm commitments from the bankers.
I think it was clear it was an opportunity lost. He had a room full of very frightened CEOs. He was in a position then to make demands, and he didn't.
He didn't want to disturb the banks. He wanted them on their side so that things were as calm as possible. There would be basically business as usual.
Today, the Obama administration did indeed extend them an olive branch.
It looks like the country's financial giants may have turned a corner.
The president's message to them.
The bankers who left the meeting had already received more than $180 billion from the federal government, with almost no conditions. Many of the president's liberal supporters were outraged.
No strings attached. I mean, everybody else, homeowners, everybody else who's trying to get a loan, everybody on Main Street, small businesses, not only are they not able to get loans, but if they get anything, there are huge strings attached. How, in good conscience, in good faith, can we not ask the banks, demand from the banks, some conditions upon getting bailed out? That just seemed incredible.
So if you look at their stock price, the Citigroup was at 98 cents just a few weeks ago. It's now up 75%.
Banks are able to borrow money at little.
As the bankers left,
Wall Street investors breathing.
inside the White House, the president had already moved on.
He was told at one point by an advisor, your legacy is going to be preventing a second Great Depression. And he says, that's not good enough for me. I mean, it wasn't enough for him to simply stop the economic problem. He wanted to have a positive, transformative agenda.
He wanted to take on healthcare reform. Once again, his advisors were divided, worried about the political consequences.
The White House had a debate about whether they should actually go forward with it. Vice President Biden was opposed to do it, absolutely opposed to doing health care.
So if you're going to do this, go into it eyes opening, know what the consequences are, and what the potentiality for success is.
He was presented with all the political arguments, and he said, I get the politics of this, but if we don't do this now, it probably doesn't get done. And he said, what are we doing here? I mean, are we going to put our approval rating on the shelf and admire it for 8 years?
This is a huge issue the president is taking on now.
The question is, could healthcare reform really happen?
He had been in office only 6 weeks. Once again, he would try to prove that bipartisanship could work. He gathered in one room at one time, all sides in the debate.
Lawmakers, doctors, nurses, hospitals, bringing together lawmakers and interest groups,
President officials, members of Congress, the White House team conferring on how to overhaul health care.
President kind of get his game on, take control of the process.
Many of these players, for years, if not decades, had a record of opposing any sort of healthcare reform efforts.
And what a remarkable achievement that would be. Something that Democrats and Republicans, business and labor, consumer groups and providers, all of us could share extraordinary pride in finally dealing with something that has been vexing us for so long. The cost of health care now costs...
In these first days, a fragile coalition seemed possible.
So, let's get to work. Thank you.
But to keep it together, Obama had to move quickly.
And that calculation is, we'll move for a quick kill, that's how they refer to it, a quick kill on Capitol Hill.
It was thought that the Senate was going to have a bill by June, we would have a bill by July, and we would go to conference and this would be over.
The president was reminded things have a way of slowing down in Congress.
We're going to take you live to a Senate Finance Committee hearing looking at health care.
The process, particularly in the Finance Committee, just felt like that race that was being run starting on January 20th all of a sudden hit some mud, and people's shoes got pretty soggy and pretty heavy.
Republicans sensed opportunity. Mitch McConnell was the Senate Minority Leader.
And McConnell was saying, don't agree to anything, keep me informed, but keep talking.
The Republicans were very clever in what they did. They pretended that they were interested in this. I call it the dance of the seven veils. I'm going to be there, and then I'm not, and then I'm going to be there, and I'm not. Now you see it, now you don't. It was all an illusion.
And meanwhile, the clock is ticking, the calendar is moving, and it's getting later and later and later. And the weight of public opinion is turning against this healthcare plan.
Some members of Congress telling the president to slow down. Long way to go before the House and Senate agree.
We are now 5 weeks.
That pretty much puts a fork in the massive bill.
By August, as Congress headed home for the summer recess, there was still no bill. Some in Washington wondered whether healthcare reform could survive.
Let's take a breather for a month.
Well, heading into the summer recess is here to great frustration for the White House. Everything was getting stuck. Everything was slowing down. And as they head into August, they don't recognize what's about to hit them.
Victory on his health care plan is still far from assured.
You want to kill my grandparents? You come through me first. God will take care of health care.
Dirty thieves!
Afro-Latinism.
The anger by the summer of '09 had reached a boiling point.
Radical communist and socialist.
There was a polarizing quality about Barack Obama that kind of came roaring forward. He became much more obvious to people with the rise of the Tea Party and the battles over health care.
There is an ugliness with these fringe people who are comparing the president to Hitler.
First week of August, the anger was spilling out, and I think that the members themselves were a bit taken aback with the intensity of that anger.
There was anger out there, and members of Congress listened, and they were scared.
It had been less than 8 months. Healthcare reform had stalled. Bipartisanship had collapsed. There was still trouble with the economy. It was time to turn things around. In early September, he headed for New York to the very very Wall Street banks he had accommodated earlier.
Obama visits New York today to deliver a major address to Wall Street.
The day after the fall of Lehman. President Obama went to Wall Street today to mark the one-year anniversary of the collapse of Lehman.
Obama came to persuade the big bankers to join a push for reform.
Down in Lower Manhattan, he'll be calling for immediate action to reform financial regulations.
Bailouts, stress tests, an alphabet soup of Treasury and Fed programs.
He decides to have a meeting. It's literally steps from Wall Street, right? I mean, Federal Hall is, you can walk down to the exchange floors.
Washington's power brokers were there, congressional leaders, his economic team.
The President of the United States.
But the titans of Wall Street didn't show up.
Essentially, none of the big figures from Wall Street show up to hear the speech. They all just stay in their offices and do their work.
They don't even show up to the speech. And it wasn't like the speech was scheduled, without notice. They just had better things to do that day.
Even the worst of the
Earlier, the president had taken the cautious course.
Even as we've
None of the bank CEOs had been fired.
large and interconnected.
If you go have a speech on Wall Street and people from Wall Street don't even show up for your speech and you're the president of the United States, what more public display can you make to try and force these guys to come and participate? And they apparently just felt like they could just wash their hands and walk away.
It's a very difficult day for Barack Obama.
We will not go back to the days of reckless behavior and unchecked excess that was at the heart of this crisis, where too many were motivated only by the appetite for quick kills and bloated bonuses.
Once everything's calmed down, once the banks have gotten what they want, once revenues have gone up again, once things seem stable, they just completely disengaged. And there was no way for the White House to force them to the table. There was nothing that the White House could do.
The speech had not gone well. In the end, Obama would leave it to Congress to address financial reform.
A young president prepares to deliver the most important speech of his first term in office.
President Obama this week faces what some say could be a major.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the president turned his attention back to healthcare.
Gets ready to take the stage in a high
He
stage.
summoned a joint session of Congress.
After consulting with a number of people, I think the president concluded, I need to take back control of this.
Madam Speaker, the President of the United States.
He understood that his presidency was at stake. He understood that he was asking people to make a very difficult vote. He also tried to explain the historic opportunity.
His audience really in that speech wasn't the public in general, it was the people sitting in that chamber.
The time for bickering is over. The time for games has passed. Now is the season for action. Now is when we must bring the best ideas of both parties together and show the American people that we can still do what we were sent here to do.
It was an attempt to sort of recapture the high ground. It was an attempt to, bring the debate back to a loftier level.
If you misrepresent what's in this...
But the tone immediately sunk to a new low.
There are also those who claim that our reform efforts would ensure illegal immigrants. This, too, is false. The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true.
A lone congressman says, you lie.
It was Republican Representative Joe Wilson from South Carolina.
It crystallized this moment in Washington. It crystallized the anger, it crystallized the fervor of the opposition.
An outburst that continues to reverberate across the country. 2 words shouted out.
Totally disrespectful, no place for it.
How did we get to a point where it's okay to yell, "You lie," at the president while he's speaking to Congress?
The story
With
today
partisan tensions and the American people increasingly unhappy with the bill,
Done, the more unlikely it becomes that
many of the president's top advisors believed health reform was now dead.
Some big issues.
Everyone on the team was very discouraged, and his head of legislative affairs, Phil Schiller, said, "Mr. President, unless you are feeling lucky, I just don't think we're going to get this done." And the president got up out of his chair and he walked over to his desk and he looked out the window and he said, "Phil, where are we?" And Phil says, "We're in the Oval Office." The president said, "And what's my name?" And he said, "Barack Obama." He said, well, of course I'm feeling lucky. Now get back to work and figure out how to get this passed.
In the end, they told him if he wanted to get it done, he would have to abandon bipartisanship and take on the Republicans.
The choice was to do nothing or to do something with the tools you had and the majority that you had. He chose to do that.
Once again, Barack Obama, the campaigner, hit the road to sell the bill.
Do not quit. Do not give up. We keep on going. We are going to get this done. We are going to make history. We are going to fix healthcare in America with your help. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
First, down to the wire on health care reform. The House votes just hours from...
It had taken more than a year. On Sunday, March 21st, 2010.
It is a 15-minute vote.
The president asked the Democrats in Congress to take what they call a hard vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 219.
A potentially career-ending
The
vote
yeas are 212.
for an unpopular bill.
The motion is adopted.
The 216th vote comes over, a big cheer erupts.
219 to 212. No votes are Republicans.
All Democrats, no Republicans.
Not a single Republican in the House or the Senate voted for the health care bill. It's a huge piece of legislation, and it is extremely unusual when any of the other major programs were passed, signed into law. They were ultimately done with both Democrat and Republican votes.
At a time when the pundits said
It was victory,
no longer possible.
but experienced Washington knew the president would pay for it.
We pushed back.
It came at a high price. The entire first year basically dedicated to this, having their hopes for bipartisanship dashed.
Now he and his party would have to wait for a verdict from the electorate, the midterm elections.
An historic election for the Republican Party. A whole new political world for the president.
In November of 2010,
A whole new day in Washington.
the president's party suffered a significant defeat.
And now the Republicans back in power in the House of
For
Representatives.
them, the midterm elections were a disaster.
Are nursing a major
It
midterm.
was really one of the first times when the country had a chance to register their opposition to Obama.
Tuesday's election was a game changer.
And boy, did they.
Repudiation of the president and his policies.
No sense in sugarcoating last night.
And that, I think, came as a surprise to this person who thought that people pretty much loved him.
The GOP gaining at least 58 seats.
I can tell you that, some election nights are more fun than others. Some are exhilarating, some are humbling. Every election.
Many of those Democrats who had taken the hard vote to support Obama's health care bill had lost.
Power rests not.
Team Boehner and Team Obama can dig in their heels.
Now the House belonged to the opposition.
The president had tried to figure out what he does with
President Obama acknowledged that he'd taken a shellacking.
I now pass this gavel and the sacred trust that goes with it to the new speaker. God bless you, Speaker Boehner.
Speaker John Boehner had 87 new Republican lawmakers, many of them deeply conservative.
These were not people who spent 25 years in politics. In fact, that was a big strike against you. They were elected not to sell out the way so many politicians had done, that they were elected to speak truth to power.
They'd spent the last 2 years running around, particularly a lot of these new congressmen in their districts, saying absolutely horrible things about the president. His ability to lead, his ideology, his integrity, his birth certificate, right? These are not easy people to deal with. This is a very difficult ideological caucus with a very strong sense of self-righteousness and great vitriol and animosity for the president.
For the president, it was a whole new game.
I think he understood that the glory days were over, that the moment of celebration of Barack Obama was past, and that he was heading into a much tougher, more trenchant period of his presidency, when everything was going to be difficult, when everything was going to be more challenging.
Like all his predecessors, the president had one arena where he could act on his own.
Scale, roll it in.
All American presidents hit that moment
where they come to the conclusion that dealing with Congress is simply too difficult, and they become foreign policy presidents in part because they have so much more leeway. But for Barack Obama, I think this happened early.
Today, we got the Obama plan for leaving Iraq.
President Obama announced the current phase of the war is coming to an end.
Early on, Obama had set a timetable for withdrawing troops from Iraq.
Getting out of Iraq.
He came into office promising to get out of Iraq. His rise had a lot to do with his opposition to the Iraq War, and I don't think, he ever looked back.
But there was another secret side to Obama's approach to the world. Candidate Obama had been critical of much of the Bush administration's top-secret war on terror. As president, it was a different story.
His people made it clear that in the terrorism arena, he was going to be as tough, if not tougher, than the Bush people. He was going to be extraordinarily aggressive. He and his people reviewed all existing ongoing CIA covert operations. And with the exception of aggressive interrogations, endorsed all of them and doubled down on a number of them.
At the center of Obama's covert war, targeted killings, death by drone.
It was the right thing to do.
The fact that Barack Obama would be the guy that leads America into this world of predator drones and Navy SEALs and cyber warfare and sort of the dark arts of the special forces and the CIA, and that would be a major part of his foreign policy. I don't think anyone would have predicted that. He's the first Nobel Peace Prize winner with a kill list. And it is very disappointing to his base. It's very disappointing to the civil liberties supporters who thought he was going to be much more of a stereotypical liberal.
In the spring of 2011, Obama's covert war scored a significant victory. It began with a single piece of intelligence. CIA Director Leon Panetta had learned Osama bin Laden might be living in a compound in Pakistan.
The intelligence case was entirely circumstantial. Nobody saw Osama bin Laden, had a full ID on him.
How could he live for many years inside a walled compound and never leave? Why would Osama bin Laden want to be 35 miles from Islamabad? Why would he want to be steps away from Pakistan's equivalent of West Point? Did any of this make sense?
The president called together his national security team.
He said to his national security team in the Situation Room, I want everybody to tell me what your view is, what you would do, what your recommendation is. And he got a very mixed response. I think of the people in the room, it was probably 50% roughly were in favor of the raid option that we ended up taking.
Only the president could make the final decision on whether to send U.S. troops into Pakistan.
He also knew that if it had gone wrong, there would not only have been dramatically negative consequences for the men who sent in and for our country's security, but also for his own politics. It very well could have been a career-ending decision.
The president decided to authorize the operation for Sunday, May 1st.
And so I think that was one of the longest days he's had as president. He said to us at the time,
in delivery, alright.
as we waited for
Sleepy.
the operation to begin.
That bin Laden was in the compound.
Won't turn it off. Okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom then. But I'm not gonna take it with me.
At that point, people kind of started to make eye contact and there was a sense of not just relief, but great pride and admiration what had taken place. And nobody spoke until the president said to everybody around him, "Somebody got him."
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
The killing of Osama bin Laden was a high point.
Thousands. Thank you. And may God bless the United States of America.
Bin Laden is dead. Bin Laden is dead.
A man with thousands of Americans' blood on his hands.
That spring, the president would face another dramatic confrontation, this time with the new Republicans in Congress. It began with a warning from Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner. Our country was in danger of running out of cash.
Geithner says we could trigger a depression worse than the 1930s. It will be indelible. It will last for generations. Tim Geithner is one scared Secretary of the Treasury.
The stakes are very high, and so there is a great deal of, I think you could only call it panic.
The new Republicans in Congress were threatening to vote against raising the debt ceiling. If Congress didn't act by August 2nd, the federal government would be unable to pay its bills.
In 2010, when all of these Republicans were running for Congress, many of them avowed Tea Partiers and the rest of them riding the Tea Party wave, the subject of the impending debt ceiling came up frequently, and virtually all of them campaigned pledging not to raise the debt ceiling.
Early on, Republican freshmen attended orientation sessions. Republican strategist Frank Luntz ran one of them.
And I asked the question, how many of you are going to vote for the debt ceiling? And only 3 or 4 of them raised their hands. And I said, if you vote for the debt ceiling, the people who put you in office are going to knock you out. If you vote for the debt ceiling, you're voting for your own death certificate, political death certificate.
This is an issue that...
For his part, the president decided to try something new. Personal politics. He figured he could connect to the Republican leader, John Boehner.
Obama told his staff, John Boehner is a country club Republican, a golf-playing, cigarette-smoking deal-maker.
The president invited Boehner to play golf with him at Andrews Air Force Base.
And afterward, they go back to the clubhouse. They're having a drink. There's a photo op. And it's at that point when Boehner says to the president, hey, you know, on this debt ceiling stuff, we're going to do something big.
On and off for weeks, Obama and Boehner met in secret.
Boehner calls these the Nicorettes and Merlot sessions. The president's having iced tea, enjoying the Nicorette, and Boehner's having a glass of Merlot, red wine, and smoking a cigarette.
It was Obama's dream negotiation, a bipartisan deal.
If the speaker and the president could come to a deal, and they both, as we used to say, hold hands and kind of jump off the ledge together, then they could not ram.
Following the horror.
Living in a different city than the rest of my friends and family means I get to visit the airport a lot more than I'm used to. And even then, it can still be stressful to catch flights and get to the airport on time. That's why my go-to travel hack is to ride with Uber. I can schedule my ride in advance with Uber Reserve for a certain pickup time, and then continue wrapping up my work in the car on my way to the airport. The best part? It makes travel logistics much simpler and less stressful, so I can shift my focus to making sure I pack everything I need for my trip, including my passport. Riding with
Elizabeth Moss is one of the most successful and well-respected television actresses working in Hollywood today. But there's something absolutely wild that most people don't even know about her. From Mad Men to The Handmaid's Tale, Elizabeth Moss has spent her career portraying women trapped inside oppressive systems, all the while being deeply devoted to one of the world's most infamous, oppressive, and alleged cults, the Church of Scientology. Moss was born into the controversial church, and while most people don't even know that Moss is a member, many others think that she's not really involved anymore, or that she's just a very casual member. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Elizabeth Moss is a deeply dedicated and devoted Scientologist who reached the covenant status of clear at only 11 years old. And every chance she gets, she's front and center at Scientology's most important yearly events with other high-ranking celebrity members like Tom Cruise and John Travolta. Not only is Moss all in on Scientology, but many high-ranking ex-Scientologists have said there are several signs that indicate Moss is being groomed to take an important central role in the church and become one of the faces of celebrities within Scientology. Scientology has taken a lot of hits in recent years, losing the vast majority of its well-known celebrity members, with several passing, several leaving the church altogether, and others being imprisoned for horrendous crimes that Scientology allegedly had their hands all over and were helping to keep buried. So let's dive into discussing Elizabeth Moss, her career, her extreme devotion to the church, and how she and her most famous roles are the perfect promotional vehicles for the alleged cult of Scientology.
I feel like you have to explain at all your faith to people.
I'm always happy to have a personal conversation with somebody off the record, but in this kind of scenario, no.
Elizabeth Moss is one of the jewels in Scientology's celebrity crown. While there are still many big celebrity Scientologists and even more previous celebrity Scientologists, Elizabeth Moss is probably the current most significant celebrity Scientologist, outside, of course, the king of Scientology, Tom Cruise. Elizabeth Moss is one of the incredibly rare celebrity Scientologists who was actually born into the church, and she also advanced to the coveted clear status at only 11 years old. Elizabeth is an extremely dedicated, lifelong Scientologist who, according to many Scientology experts and former members of Scientology, Moss may be being groomed to take on a much more public and prominent role as a celebrity Scientology church ambassador. But I think if you ask everyone who has watched and enjoyed Elizabeth Moss on television, be it in Mad Men, Top of the Lake, or of course The Handmaid's Tale, most of those people would probably be very shocked to hear that she is a Scientologist. Elizabeth Moss has only spoken a handful of times about Scientology, and she largely doesn't discuss it publicly at all, which I suspect is probably on the advice of her agents and publicists, because a few times that she has got defensive about it, it's been in magazine profiles or when she's replying to people on Instagram. During the 1990s and the early 2000s, the Church of Scientology boasted many celebrity members who proudly discussed the church at any opportunity. During this time, celebrities in some of the biggest movies and also featured in some of the biggest television shows. But the church also had close relationships with even more stars than most people know, because although they did have people like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley on television, they had people like Danny Masterson and Laura Prepon, but there was also these people like Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis who orbited around Scientology, and although they weren't Scientologists themselves, they were there performing on stage every Christmas for Scientology in the Celebrity Center, and there has always been a lot of discussion about people like Ashton Kutcher, Will Smith and Jada Smith, and how involved they are with Scientology. At this time, you would have these big celebrity Scientologists who would talk constantly about how great Scientology was, how much it done for them, how much they loved it, and then these orbiters like my mortal enemy Ashton Kutcher.
No, I'm so glad I'm turning not ready. I'm tired of being on live. Good night, everyone. I'm so itchy. I'm so itchy from shaving. I'm so itchy from shaving. Look at that. I literally I regret shaving. Fuck. It's itchy as fuck. I don't like it. I fucking hate shaving. Just trimmed. She prettied herself. Fuck you. I don't believe it. Oh boy. Good night, everyone. I am leaving. Go back to sleep. Someone just said I look pregnant. Basically, the thing implied for that. Bye. Bye-bye.